Good evening and welcome to the Planning Commission meeting of September 10th, 2012. Would you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God. And because tomorrow is September 11th, we just have a very short moment in silence in memory of those that perished on that terrible day. Thank you. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Ferris?
Here.
Commissioner Roundtree?
Here.
Commissioner Tapking?
Here.
Commissioner Turpel?
Here.
Chair Reynolds?
Here. And now is the time for public comments. I have one public comments tonight. Mr. Nick Kidwai, if you'd like to come forward, state your name and city of residence, and you have 5 minutes. Good evening, Mr. Kidwai.
Good evening, Chair Darrell Reynolds, Planning Commissioners, Nick Iqbal Kidwai, resident of Newbury Park, still Director of Concerned Citizens. It's a very small group, it's getting smaller. Hopefully we can get some members. But nobody even knows that there's a Planning Commission meeting. I mean, I started this gig in 91, 92, mid-90s. We had a local newspaper that would tell you that there was what was happening at City Hall. The good news was we had the internet, and right on page 1 it showed the calendar and the meetings, and sometimes it would not show Planning Commission meetings, and I would complain about that. Now it's completely gone. I mean, it's just a useless page unless people like me, you know where you're going, you can find it. But the casual person that goes on, and I was going to make a copy of it, but you know, I have to make a living also. And but anybody can go on toaks.org and you can see the calendar, but you have to click on it. That's not, I mean, you are in, that's the problem with the people is, maybe I shouldn't be here because say people, you should be involved in something that is your specialty. But then again, in a way, maybe it is my specialty because I've been following you folks for 20 years. What should I say? Well, it was good that last time we didn't meet at the small theater. It worked out fine. You have supposedly 3 cases this week, today. But that would have accommodated it at one. I mean, we have lost our country. We have lost our city. I mean, I loved it over there in the small theater because you can see the eyeballs. You can make personal contacts. Over here, Mr. Roundtree is like a little dot in there, like a little round dot, I guess, in the corner. It's too big. And the sound system has never worked over here. For somebody who's hard of hearing, the best seat is at home in front of your giant TV or even in the lobby. But here, it's very difficult to hear. And it's a theater. That's what it is. It's not a council chamber. It never has been. Mr. Mitnick got a chance to give his side on the Ventura County Star yesterday. Hope people will read about it. That's the other problem that has happened. I mean, is the people who in the private sector that pay the bills, their incomes have gone down and down. The benefits have gone down. There are very few jobs. Young people, like my children, stuff like they are struggling, working underemployed. And people in the government sector, I mean, I have failed. I mean, that's why sometimes I feel disappointed is that in the last 10 years, people in this government, people at county levels, etc., their wages have doubled. And so, and then when you add the perks, I mean, it used to be that people went into government because the salaries were low, but the perks were good. And I mean, congratulations on staff again for coming, that European vacation that you just enjoyed. I mean, I don't know how to speak anymore because, 7 weeks or 8 weeks you've been off. And it is true that when the cat is gone, the mice will play. I mean, it screws up the whole thing. It screws up the whole schedule of the Planning Commission when you don't meet for 7 or 8 weeks. And you still have not changed your schedule because you only meet once every 6 weeks now, or once every 8 weeks, but you still have the schedule, the flexibility to meet every other week. But that's another reason that people are not involved, because you look and see the meeting and it's cancelled. And there's important meetings that are going on about the dissolution of the redevelopment agency. There's supposed to be a meeting on Wednesday at 3 in the afternoon, so people cannot participate. But then again, that meeting has been cancelled. And that's the thing with the traffic commission meetings. You look at the meetings outside because the city is at build-out. This is the time actually for the citizens, for the Planning Commission to sharpen the pencils to make sure that we are able to get the best out of the limited resources that we have. 9/11 you just talked about with that beautiful flag. I mean, protect the freedoms that we have and don't bring the homeowners here. That's the thing. So many things are done over the counter. You need to really change that so that the homeowners don't need to come over here, and these ordinances do not require Planning Commission approval. Thank you for letting me speak, Honorable Distinguished Chair Darrell Reynolds.
Thank you. And Mr. Kidway, I wanted to respond to you on two things. I know we usually don't. I found it very difficult to chair the meeting up in that room, and the one reason is that there wasn't a clock. You can see how long you have to speak, but it was a very difficult meeting to control the speakers that night, that they went on because they didn't know how much time they had. And finally, I used my own telephone to time them, so even though they were being timed at the side, but they couldn't see their time. So I find it a very difficult room. Also, if we hadn't taken a break, I probably would have missed about 3 or 4 meetings because of my surgery that I went back to Maryland for. So I was very glad for the summer break, and I planned my surgery so I could do it during the break. And I know that with children out of school and people that have young children, that's the time to take vacation. So I've always been in support of the city taking that August break. So.
Okay. I apologize, and I really appreciate your service to the community, and I will not argue with you, and I thank you for your service.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Kidwai. With written comments, announcements, continuances, Mr. Town.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I'd like to mention that we have several supplemental packets with regard to Case 6C, that is KSK Investments / Miller Ranch. There's a number of items in these supplemental packets. I won't go through all the details, but they do include correspondence from the applicant's legal representative, a letter from a niece of the previous property owners, and also a number of petitions submitted by residents in opposition to the project. We also have, as indicated at the back of supplemental number 1, one minor change to a condition, number 144, which we'll want to be sure that we remember when we make the final motion on that case. So 3 supplementals. Also, just for the Commission's information, at about 5 o'clock I received one final petition from a Ms. Moses in opposition to the project, and that's also included with your supplemental materials. In addition, I would like to draw the Commission's attention to, it's actually page 1 of your packet, it's a letter wherein staff is recommending that Case 6A be continued to a date certain. That would be your next Planning Commission meeting on September 24th. And at that time, you will hear that case, and that has to do with a proposed development agreement for a property on Newberry Road. And so with that, I'd like to request that the Commission take a vote on that continuance to September 24th, a date certain. And that's all I had at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Town. And with that, I'll ask the clerk to please open the first hearing, Case 6A.
Hearing advertised as required by law is hereby open to consider Agenda Item 6A regarding case DAGR 2012-70287. Applicant, City of Thousand Oaks. Request to consider development agreement with property owner that would establish development requirements for a proposed 55-unit condominium project. Location, 1200 Newbury Road.
Thank you. And as indicated by Mr. Town, they're asking for a continuance to our next meeting, September 24th. A motion in support?
Madam
Commissioner
Chair, I'd like to
Roundtree?
make a motion for continuance to September 24th meeting for
Thank
case DAGR 2012-70287.
Any discussion on the motion? Please vote.
Motion passed 5-0.
Thank you. And would the clerk please open Case 6B?
Hearing advertised as required by law is hereby open to consider Agenda Item 6B regarding case RPMN 2012-70352 and OTP 2012-70353. Applicant, Viceroy Trust. Request to allow 4,000 square foot garage addition with maximum 25 feet height, observation tower, and relocation of 5 native oak trees on site. Location, 3970 Brunston Court.
Thank you. And good evening, Mr. Kearns. Would you like to give the staff report?
Yes, thank you. Good evening, Chair Reynolds and members of the Commission. As mentioned, before you this evening are 2 applications, a minor modification to an existing residential plan development permit, as well as an oak tree permit for the property located at 3970 Brunston Court. The minor modification request involves construction of about a 4,000 square foot garage addition, including a tower element which has a couple small balconies, a new motor court area, and related landscape elements, including some new water features. And the oak tree permit request involves permission to relocate 5 oak trees to alternate on-site locations. This is an aerial perspective of the subject property. As you'll note, the property is bound by Brunston Court to the north, Canyon Road to the south. You have Westlake Boulevard to the west, and single-family residential properties to the east on Upper Ranch Road. The subject tract and corresponding RPD permit were approved in 1985 to subdivide about 70 acres into 16 lots of record, and 11 of these lots were designated for single-family dwelling use. The part of the RPD permit established specific grading areas for each one of these lots called grading limit boundaries. The purpose of these grading limit boundaries was to try to restrict grading in 25% sloping terrain, as well as silhouetting of dwellings up on ridge lines. It also assisted in retaining 28 oak trees throughout the entire 70-acre parcel, and 23 of those oak trees are on the subject property. In 1986, the Planning Commission considered a major modification for the subject property, requesting to relocate the grading limit boundary from the lower portion of the property near Westlake Boulevard to the upper portion, and that was denied. Again, in 1989, the Planning Commission considered the same request to relocate the grading limit boundary, and in this instance, it was approved to move it from down below to up top. It also approved construction of a home and a tennis court. There was also an oak tree permit with that application for encroachment within 5 oak trees for site grading and site improvements. It did deny relocation of 1 oak tree, which is tree number 2 in your subject request. In 1994, City Council approved on appeal a request to expand the grading limit boundary to incorporate the lower portion of the property. As part of that approval, they created a restricted use area on the slope areas on the property outside the grading limit boundary. And they permitted landscaping within these slope areas. So there was landscaping that was not typical for the native vegetation, but it was approved for this area, but it included 124 live oaks in these slopes. And it also approved construction of the maintenance building on the lower pad. In 2007, a minor modification was approved to allow an increase from the 21-foot height ceiling on these for this house to 25 feet, and it approved a second floor addition. And just last year, a minor modification was approved for a first and second floor addition for expansion of the basement and an extensive remodel of the house, which is currently underway. The minor modification portion of this request involves the largest property of the 11 single-family dwellings in Tract 4023. The parcel is about 16.28 acres. Roughly 7 acres is located within the grading limit boundaries, and the remainder is restricted use area. With regard to development standards, the proposed addition meets all applicable development standards as they relate to height, to setbacks. All of the activity is located within the established grading limit boundary for this specific lot. And the architectural design is continuing the theme that's been approved for the house. So it's going to continue an 18th century classic French architectural design. This slide demonstrates the location of the addition, which is this shaded area here, relative to the existing garage. And as you can see, well, maybe see, it's about 300 feet from Brunston Court, about 500 feet from Westlake Boulevard, and it's situated about 600 feet from Canaan Road. The pad elevation for the garage is roughly 100 feet higher than Westlake Boulevard. These are the proposed elevations for the garage addition as well as the tower element. As you can see from the north elevation here, the tower element's height does not exceed that of the existing garage in the background here. And the architectural design continues with the theme of the rest of the house. The oak tree permit request is asking to relocate 5 oak trees from the area of where the proposed addition wants to go. And initially, when the application was submitted, staff had met with the applicant's design group to look at alternative designs to try to avoid relocation of the trees. However, due to the site constraints, the grading limit boundary, and 2 existing easements on the property, as well as the restricted use areas, it just wasn't practical nor feasible to meet the client or the applicant's needs. So in order to consider a request for removal and relocation of 4 more oak trees, the Planning Commission is required to consider this application. The request involves 4 valley oak trees and 1 coast live oak tree. The valley oaks are proposed to be relocated to the lower pad, and the live oak tree is proposed to be moved fairly close to its current location after all the site preparation is done. This shows the area of the existing oak trees. These are the valley oaks in this area, near the shaded area where the addition's going. And the coast live oak is in this area and is proposed to be relocated here. The valley oaks are proposed to be boxed and staged down in the lower pad area, just to the southwest of the maintenance building, and these are the proposed new locations. And the coast live oak will be staged up here near the driveway and transplanted to here. The next few slides just demonstrate the size and appearance of these trees. This is tree number 2 in the report, which is a valley oak. This is the 1 coast live oak, the valley oak, number 5, and this is generally the proposed location for the relocation of the live oak, which would go out in approximately this area once the site grading preparation is done. This is the general location for the proposed relocation of the Valley Oaks. As you can see in the background, there's some other oak trees, an oak tree here, so the relocation area would augment these trees. In order to approve any oak tree permit, the municipal code requires that one of 4 findings is made. The first being for structural maintenance or health of the tree or necessary clearance pruning from existing structures. Approval for public safety purposes, if it's a dead or hazardous tree, or if there's required clearance pruning from above roadways or pedestrian walkways. To accommodate reasonable and conforming use of a property, which would be typically for construction of a home or access to a property or other infrastructure improvements. Or that the approval is consistent with the intent of the preservation and protection guidelines. And in this case, staff finds that the relocation meets the intent of the policy because the trees are being located to an alternate location on the property. They're not being removed from the property and they're not being destroyed. Additionally, this property was initially intended to have 23 oak trees preserved on site. Over time, the previous property owners have planted an additional 91 oak trees, so there's about 114 oak trees on the property today. Specific project conditions are recommended for the approval to address all the city requirements in the oak tree preservation and protection guidelines as they relate to relocation procedures. One, that there's a maintenance and monitoring program in place for these trees to ensure that the transplants are successful. And how the transplants are supervised by the project arborist, all phases of the transplant from the boxing procedure to the relocation of the boxes to replacing them in the new transplant locations. And that comparable size oak trees are reserved in case one of the trees do not succeed. And we also require a security deposit equal to the amount of purchasing one of the reserved trees. The applicant has agreed to all these conditions. Both projects are exempt from CEQA as a Class 1 and Class 4 exemption. The Class 1 involves the minor alterations to private structures and the land. Class 4 involves minor alterations to landscaping, which would pertain to the oak tree transplant request. Staff is therefore recommending approval of the minor modification 2012-70352, as well as its corresponding oak tree permit, 2012-70353. Basis for this recommendation are the findings contained in the report, as well as the suggested conditions of approval contained in the staff report. And this concludes my presentation. Available for questions.
Thank you. Are there questions of staff? Commissioner Ferris?
Thank you, Mr. Kearns. First, just want to mention that I had the opportunity to visit the site with you today and did actually meet the attorneys and design team, construction team of the applicant today, so I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that on the record. Also requested that any information they have be brought to the hearing so that we're able to see that in public. If I just had a couple quick questions. One was, how does this particular addition to the garage fit within or close to the grading limit boundaries? Is it within that, so we're not stretching the limits of those?
Yeah, all components of the project, the grading activity, the new pond that's already been approved, as well as the addition, the new motor court, are all confined within the existing grading limit boundary.
Okay, thank you. And also, I think you mentioned in your staff report, but if you can kind of reiterate it for me, that the proposed plan and the height elements, how do those relate to the current structures that are on the site? Is it going to be taller? Is it going to be the same? Is it going to, how does that compare?
Well, the garage addition, the bulk of the garage addition is single story and it's going to be much lower than the existing roof lines. The tower element is going to be about the same height as the existing garage and lower than the main portion of the residence, so that no portion of the addition will exceed the existing heights.
Okay. And last one at this point would be, can you give me an assessment? It's mentioned in the staff report of the assessment of, we have the particular project in front of us, which is requesting the oak tree removal and transplantation. But what were the other reviewed alternatives, and can you give kind of an understanding as to why those did not meet the needs? A little bit more specific. I know you mentioned it in your staff.
Yeah, we discussed an alternate design, which include kind of a breezeway element going between the trees, but it didn't provide a functional route for the applicant. It was an open air design, and the applicant wanted an enclosed functional connection from the proposed garage to the main dwelling. So even in that design, it did require a relocation of, I think it was at least 2 trees. So we went back to the original design and instead are recommending approval of this design with appropriate measures in place to safeguard the trees.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Other Commissioner Tapke? Commissioner Turpel?
Good evening, Mr. Kearns. I also want to just put on the record that I was out at the site on Friday with the applicant's attorneys and his staff, as well as with Mr. Kearns to look at the property. So I just want to put that on the record so that we had actually a visual as to what's going on. Sometimes looking at on the charts and the maps and stuff, it's kind of difficult to see what's going to be happening. So that's for the record. Mr. Kearns, could you talk about that? Because Commissioner Ferris brought this up, and I'd kind of like to put it on record. When he was talking about the roof lines, you know, the tower element that's going up, I know we talked about this. It's not clear. How visible is that from the surrounding area?
Well, the way it's situated, it's back behind the existing garage area. So from Westlake Boulevard, it would not be visible for several reasons. Just the distance, the difference in grade elevations, as well as the existing vegetation. Let's see, the existing pad, if you recall from being out the site, is going to be lowered down to the existing pad elevation of the garage that's there now. So you won't be able to see it from any public right-of-way.
Okay, that's good. And then just to, and probably more for our viewers and the public, that could you go over the mitigation that we put in place in the event that, and I know you brought it up in your staff report, but in the event that one of these transplanted trees do go down, that how is that mitigated?
Well, one of the conditions, and it's a key condition required as part of the recommendation for approval, is that the applicant locate like-size oak trees, comparable to the size of the trees that are being transplanted, and reserve those for a period of a year. Just in the event that one of the trees do die, we have a tree that's in place, secured, that we can use the deposit money to purchase and relocate on the property.
Okay, and if I remember correctly, the people that are, the companies that are moving these trees is the same? Boy, my English is getting away from me. Is the same company that actually moved relocated the oaks here at the Civic Arts Plaza, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, no further questions.
Thank you. And I believe that condition is 57, isn't it?
Actually, that is a correction I need to make to the report. The report, prior to the conclusion, makes a reference to it being condition number 8, where it's actually it's actually condition number 8 of the oak tree permit. However, it's condition 56 in this.
57 or 56?
56, I believe.
56 and 57. Yeah. Okay. 57's reserving the trees. Okay. Commissioner Roundtree, did you have questions?
Yes. I also need to disclose that I was at the property with the rest of the crew today, so for the record. The question has to do with this one-year time period. I'm unfamiliar how long it takes if you transplant an oak tree and it's going to die. How long does it take before it becomes evident? Because 1 year, is that enough to determine, you know, a 75-year-old oak tree from dying?
Well, the condition is actually, it's a 1 year, there's a monitoring program that happens on a monthly basis. And then for that 1 year period, we go out there and send our consultant out there to check on the condition of the tree. If, in his opinion, the tree is marginal or seems to be declining, then we extend that period for another year. And then after that second year, if it's still marginal, at that point we can use the deposit and secure one of the reserve trees.
Is that deposit returned to the applicant after it's been determined that it's been a successful transplant?
Yes, it is.
Thank
you. Okay. Commissioner Tapking, did you want to declare?
Okay. I guess so. Along with the rest of the Planning Commission, I visited the site also and had a chance to review the conditions out there and where the trees, et cetera, what's going on. I have no questions.
Okay. And I also wanted to declare that I was out on the property on Friday and with staff and also the team for the project. With that, is there anything else, Mr. Kearns, that
Not at
before I
this
open the
time.
public hearing? Okay. No further questions? Then I will open the public hearing, and I will call Mr. Mark Sellers. And while he's coming up, I want to declare that Mr. Sellers is my private attorney for some property in Laguna Beach, and I won't hold that against him. So. And also, Mr. Sellers, there's several cards. Can you tell me how you'd like to use your 15 minutes?
Then I will have Mr. Packman, then Mr. Wallace, the arborist, and Mr. John Boat, who is the representative of the tree relocation company, and then the property owner at the end will make a couple comments.
Oh, okay, so you'll use that within the 15
Yes.
minutes? You don't want to
Yes.
get them separate 3 minutes, so.
Yes.
Okay, with that, would you state your name and city residence, please? And good evening, Mr. Sellers.
Good evening. Mark Sellers with the Jackson DeMarco Law Firm, resident of Thousand Oaks. First, I'd like to hand out some elevations, renderings that show the quality of work that we're proposing for this remodeling project. In addition, I have a letter from a neighbor of support for this particular project. As staff mentioned, this is a very large parcel. I feel this is probably one of the most unique parcels in all of North Ranch. It has a unique history. The parcel has been the situs for the pride of ownership of the prior owners, and I think that the present owner is not only has a tremendous pride in what this property ultimately will look like, but to me it's just an extraordinary effort to make this a home that everybody can be proud of. I think a lot has changed since 1989 when that other oak tree permit was heard by the Planning Commission. Staff has already mentioned at that time there were 23 oak trees on this property. There are now 114 oak trees. In addition, this owner in his landscape plan will plant more oak trees along Westlake Boulevard to create what we call an oak grove, so that eventually there'll be a canopy of oak trees all along that extent of the property, which is probably one of the longest property lines on this large parcel. I think the most important change in those years has been the expertise of relocation companies in their ability to successfully replant these trees. They will be discussing tonight that success rate. I think that success rate is such that we do not equate relocation with removal. We think that this effort in relocation will not only be successful, but we think it will preserve these oak trees. As our arborists will discuss, they are being relocated to what we call a more oak-friendly site than they presently are in. We're in agreement with all the proposed conditions, particularly the replacement obligation, which is considerable. We will be depositing a security of $125,000 to make sure that these oak trees survive or an adequate replacement is planted if that doesn't occur. Again, we feel that this is consistent with the city's effort and goal to preserve oak trees. It's, again, not what we technically say is a removal. It's a relocation, and there's a great deal of expertise involved in the team that the owners put together. With that, I'd like to thank the staff for their cooperation in getting this matter to the Commission tonight in an expedited process under the circumstances. They've been very cooperative. Unless there are any questions, I'll let Mr. Packman go over the design options that were looked at and the actual architectural features.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Packman. Would you state your name and city residence, please?
Sure. My name is Paul Packman from Bigland Architectural Group. It's in the city of Newbury Park. This rendering is also one of the renderings that you have. There's two renderings, and there's also a site plan, which I believe that you have in the packet that was just handed out to you as well. Just a brief, we did do a narrative on this, and just a brief overview of the challenges that we faced in designing the additional 7-car garage for as an attached portion to this. We did stay within the grading boundary limit, and Mr. Ferris, we did also maintain the 20-foot setbacks from top of slope, which was right at the grading boundary limit, so we stayed within those confines. The height was also another issue, that as a single-story garage, we are just a little bit under 20 feet on the actual majority portion of the addition of the single car garages. The quote-unquote the tower element is on the interior portion of the property. It's under 25 feet, and it actually is at the same height as the existing mid-level of the existing house. The area that's over the garages right now, there are bedrooms that are over the garage, so we maintained that same height. And did not go over that. The second story is even higher than that, so we were able to stay within that. And as far as the viewing from that tower, the design intent was to be able to look down onto the pond gardens that are to the north, and then also to the existing motor court to the west. And so those were the challenges, those are the confines, and trying to stay within that grading boundary limit, and also to satisfy what the requirements for our client are in placing those in where the only spot that we really could, and we actually tried to be able to do it so that there were only 4 oak trees that we were only having to relocate, but felt necessary with maintaining the site setback of the 20 feet from the grading boundary limit, that we had to include that one as well. And so that was the reason why we had the 5 oak trees that were relocated. And again, in staying in the context with the house, with everything else that's been going on, and I'll echo Mr. Sellers that working with the city has been, with the planning department, it's been a joy, if you can say that, with the city. It's been great actually working with them, and through this whole process, from the beginning, from the minor mod that we had for the original house to the garages. So they've done their due diligence. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Robert Wallace, if you come forward, state your name and city of residence, please.
My name is Robert Wallace. I live in Simi Valley, California, and I've been the project arborist on this site for the current home construction project here. And I did the tree report, the initial tree report, and tagged, identified, photographed all of the oak trees and all the trees on the property. As far as the oaks that are going to be relocated, we have 1 Quercus agrifolia and 4 Quercus lobata, the valley oaks. These trees, I've been concerned about, particularly the 4 valley oaks, from the first time that I saw them, because they're in a very poor location in that they're growing in lawns. And there's lawns growing right up to the trunks, and we know that's basically deadly for oaks. As well, the soil levels were elevated at some point. That's another deadly factor for the oak trees. I'd like to see that changed, and so that was a concern of mine. One of the oak trees has some exudation on the trunk, which is a sign of stress, and I believe it's related to this turf issue and the raised soil. So when it comes to boxing and relocation, I think that's an optimum solution here, being that the trees are going to have to be removed for the project. We know the valley oaks, they thrive better in valley floors and deeper soils and closer to a natural water table than they do on ridge lines where these trees are at. So, and where they're going, down closer to Westlake Boulevard and down in the lower part of the property, they will be a better asset to the community and the cars going by, along with the other oak trees, the numerous other oak trees that the applicant is planning on installing down in that area as well. So it's actually going to create an oak grove of various size trees. Of the mature trees, you know, these 5 trees are going to be relocated, and then we'll have the smaller trees that'll be added to that as well. As far as I just wanted to, you know, say for John Mode and Senate Tree Company, I've worked with them for many years and recommend them highly as far as tree transplanting, large tree relocation. They're known to, and I know this to be true, to have a really incredible success rate. He'll talk to you more about that. But I'm totally confident that these trees will survive the transplant process. We're approaching the ideal time of year to do that. And I foresee, I just can't imagine any problems at all with the relocation and then the survivability. And, you know, 20 years ago, when I first was doing quite a bit of consulting, the tree transplanting idea, as far as the larger mature trees, there was quite a bit of concern, including myself. I didn't think it was really that good of an idea. But over time, the process of boxing relocated became more refined, and then finally with the idea of building basins within the boxes was critical. That ensured that these root balls would stay moist and then maintain the basins after the trees are put back in the ground. So the aftercare has been improved to where now we have a tremendous success rate with moving large trees. And so that's, if you have any questions.
Any questions? I guess not. The next speaker is Mr. John Mote.
Thank you very much.
Oh, Mr. Roundtree, why don't we wait till we have all the speakers? And Mr. Mote, if you'd like to come forward and state your name and city residence.
Good evening. John Mote, president of Senate Tree Company, and I live in Sun Valley, California. Thank you. Very flattering comments from Bob. Senate Tree Company's been in the business of moving trees about 16 years, but my experience goes back almost 30. In 1984, I started with another company you probably heard of, Valleycrest Tree Company, for their specimen tree moving division. And in 1988, I was the original salesman at a little project up the street called Sherwood Country Club. And that was a $150,000 contract moving 35 trees. We got started, and about a week into it, they were pushing trees over with bulldozers, and we were boxing the trees, and Mr. Murdoch landed in a helicopter, and we had made a deal with his vice president to buy trees that they were going to demolish and take them to our nursery. And we happened to have 3 semi-truck trailers loaded with these trees that would have otherwise been demolished, leaving the project when he landed. And he asked his vice president, where are those trees going? And Bob Willing told him, well, you're clearing these trees, you're going to haul them to the dump, we're going to sell them to Valley Crest. And he said, no, no, no. I want every tree back here, and I want to save every tree. And the rest is history. 4 years later, 2,500 trees, about $5 million, and a 90% success rate. A phenomenal project and a great job for me to learn as a young man in my 20s. In 1997, I started Senate Tree Company. We've worked for Sherwood. We've done about nearly $2 million in tree moving for Sherwood on the other 18 holes that they built out there and other work around the clubhouse. So we're very familiar and fortunate to have a client like Mr. Murdoch who truly loves trees. And closer to City Hall, we moved a really phenomenal tree here that I won't forget, because every time I look at my platform trailer and see that little bend in it, I remember your tree. It was a Quercus lobata we moved out here on Lake, I think the Lakes Avenue and Teo Boulevard, weighed 360,000 pounds, bent my trailer, and that was almost 10 years ago, and it's doing great today. I brought a picture of it I shot last week. I don't know if you can see it if I put it there. Or... Not a great picture. I printed that in the office. But the reason I mentioned the Sherwood project is we could have got a better result than 90%. When Mr. Murdoch decided to save every tree, they've been clearing for about a week. So when he gave the mandate to save every tree, we ended up boxing a lot of C quality trees. Contrast that with Brunston Court. Those trees are B or better, B quality or better. So right out of the gate, we're going to get a better result. Another thing about Sherwood is when that project started in fall of 1988, it went year-round for 4 years. So we moved trees in spring, summer, fall, winter. So half of the trees were moved out of season, much more stressful for the trees. At Brunston Court, the timing is perfect, couldn't be better. So I really feel confident we're going to get a great result. Does this mean my time is up?
It means you have 1 minute or less than 1 minute.
Well, I don't want to take any more time, but if you have any questions.
After, I think Mr. Thole wants to speak, Mr. Toll wants to speak, and then we'll go for questions. So, Mr. Thomas Toll, if you come forward, state your name and city residence, please.
Thomas Toll, Calabasas, California. First of all, I appreciate you taking the time to come up to the site and look at the property. We appreciate that. My family's in the very fortunate position that we were able to pick anywhere we wanted in Los Angeles to live, and after an exhaustive search and looking at Thousand Oaks, Westlake, decided that this was really the place that we wanted to be. It's an amazing community, and frankly, this project is something we're putting substantial investment into, and I think the result will be pretty spectacular. The reason that we're moving these trees, although I absolutely respect what the laws and everything are, there's a higher law, which is my wife is going to kill me if anything happens to these trees. So the reason that we brought the experts forth that we have and so forth is that not just because of the city code, but conservation is extraordinarily important to us. The carbon footprint of this property will be in a much better place with all the improvements that we're making between wells and solar and all the plannings that we're doing. So I just wanted to mention how important it was to us personally and how excited we are to live in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go back to questions of the speakers. I believe there was a question for Mr. Wallace. If you'd come back up to the microphone and state your name and city residence, please.
Robert Wallace, Simi Valley.
And Commissioner Roundtree.
This was more of a clarification question about the success rate. I've heard a couple of different, I'm guessing it's now in excess of 90% success rate, or that's your best guess on this particular project?
Well, and this is what I understand is to be better than 90%, the success rate, just generally across the board with Senate Tree Company and boxing and moving trees. Another thing, I will be, personally involved with the whole process. I'll be working closely with John because I want to make sure that those soil levels get corrected around the base of the trees. I'll be involved in the aftercare. John is, the beautiful thing about John Mode and Senate Tree Company is that he's there through every part of the project, and he's hands-on. He's not only company owner, but when you move a tree, or I recommend a tree gets removed on jobs I'm involved in, call in John Mote. He's there on the job. He's overseeing the whole transplant process, and it's a great thing when the company owner is there to make sure things are done right. And so that's one of the reasons why I value his company above all other large tree transplanting companies.
Last question had to do with the Valley Oaks, the 4 of them that are up there. Are those natural to the top of the hill?
Well, that was a question that I had myself, and I'm assuming that they are. There are other Valley Oaks up on the hill on the east side that I know are native to their location. There's no question about it. Just they're growing on the slopes and toward the top. Those right on the top at that end, I couldn't say 100%. Whether they were, but I have a feeling they were there, and then they were just worked around and preserved during the initial construction, but I couldn't say 100%.
Are there any other questions of any of the other speakers? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Wallace. And our next speaker is Anthony Mason. If you come forward and state your name and city residence, and you have 3 minutes.
I'm actually from Los Angeles, and I have no further comments. I think the group covered it very well.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Nick Kidwai, you come forward, state your name and city of residence, and you also have 3 minutes. Good evening again.
Good evening again, Chair Darrell Reynolds, Nick Kidwai, resident of Newbury Park. I come in support of this project. However, I may be the only one that will bring out the elephant in the room. This is the same property that the so-called Honorable Charles Probst owned and planted some vegetation on Canaan Road that created an uproar. And he wanted to get it passed. It was against the city rules, and gave $10,000 to a city councilman and others, and was kind of lulled into giving $2 million to have his name put on the theater, but all that is history. Even Google doesn't have much on it except that he left the city and sold the property for $10 million. My general question is, and I hope nobody will take it in the wrong fashion, but who needs a 32,000 square foot home? Why do you need a 32,000? I have some friends who married into not wealth but position, I guess, surgeons, doctors that own 10,000, 12,000 square foot homes, and I go there as an old friend, and they have waiters with gloves serving you, and it's 10, 12,000 square foot, so you have to heat the whole house, air condition the whole house. For 2 people, the children have left the home. So this is 32,000, but maybe this is a retreat for corporate purposes. That makes sense, is that the CEO invites people from Europe, from everywhere in the country, and enjoy the... By the way, this is wrong. I mean, the finer thing is that the applicant should have 15 minutes, and then the people who are on the applicant's team, that time should not dilute from the citizens. I mean, it doesn't make any difference to me, but to use this, and Mr. Ferris had pointed that out in the past, is that people who come, they should be given the 5 minutes that they're entitled to, and it should not be diluted, the time should. This should really be heard over the counter. The gentleman or the family has some money. That does not mean that the city can dip into it, and we provide full employment to staff and billable hours to the distinguished dream team. So long as it doesn't affect other people. The Charles Probst thing was a disaster. It was ridiculous for the community. This thing should really be done over the counter, and it's about time that you visit the Oak Tree Ordinance and don't slowly destroy this city.
Thank you. You want to say something about that? Mr. Town?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick response to Mr. Kidwai, one of Mr. Kidwai's comments. This case came before the Planning Commission tonight per the municipal code, which requires that the removal, and that is the way this is defined in our code, even for transplants, of 4 or more trees must be heard by the Planning Commission. So I think Mr. Kidwai's point is that perhaps the city should review that threshold, but in the past, that has been the standard that we've used. 3 or fewer oak trees are dealt with administratively, but 4 or more must come before this body.
Okay, thank you. And let's go back to staff. Mr. Kearns, do you have any response to any of the statements made?
I have nothing to add at this time.
Are there any questions of staff from the planning commissioners? Sure. Mr. Town?
Just one other quick comment. There was a question about whether these trees were native or not, and staff did research the site plan, the original grading plan, and these particular oak trees we're discussing this evening were shown on the original site plan back in, I believe it was 1984. And so we did look at that very carefully. It's one of the first questions that staff asked as well, but there was no indication that they were owner planted, and therefore, again, they were considered to be native oak trees and had to be handled in this particular method.
Thank you. With that, I'll call Mr. Mark Sellers back if you wanted to do the rebuttal of 5 minutes. And state your name and city residence again, please. Oh, excuse me, Mr. Sellers.
Mark Sellers, City of Thousand Oaks. My rebuttal comments are going to be real short. As to the size of the house, that's not relevant tonight. What's relevant tonight is the location of the garage and whether it makes feasible to separate that garage a great distance from the home, and to me, whether these trees can be successfully relocated, which we're very confident they can. And if they can, as again, we've secured and will secure reserved trees to replace them and put up a substantial deposit to make sure that happens. With that, those are my comments.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Sellers. And with that, I'll close the public hearing, and now it's a time for deliberation. Motion, Commissioner Tapking.
I'll make a motion to move this forward. Okay. My motion would be to approve the staff recommendation for RPMN 2012, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and all of the appropriate conditions as noted in the staff report.
Okay, comments to the motion? Commissioners, anybody have? Commissioner Ferris?
Just quickly, is it possible if Commissioner Tapking could include the oak tree permit specifically in his et cetera, just so that we're clear on
Et cetera, including the oak tree permit. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, with that, final Commissioner Ferris.
I do have some comments on it, and you know, this is one of those cases that you know, I think it demonstrates one of the unique parts of what makes Thousand Oaks, is that when there are developments, whether they're big or small, that do affect oak trees, whether they are to prune them, protect them, transplant them, remove them, we take that seriously because we care about oak trees in the community. And when there's 4 or more, it comes to us. If this had no oak tree permit whatsoever, I'm perfectly, the minor modification, the plans look great to me. So, and he has rights to do whatever he wants on his property. I have discomfort with the removal and transplantation of the oak trees, but I think that the manner in which the applicant is taking care to do that, the health of the oaks, where they're being placed. I do concur with staff's assessment that it is consistent with the oak tree ordinance. I feel comfortable voting for the motion. I have discomfort again because, you know, the fact if these are, and it sounds like they were, original oak trees on the property, we strive to try and make sure development goes around them and doesn't impact them, and that we should continue to strive to do that. Even though technology is better at removing them. And I do respect, but would be counter to the opinion of Mr. Sellers that even though these are, the relocation isn't a removal, we are actually removing it from its current natural state. And I think that it would serve the city well to continue on the current path of evaluating it in that context, so that we do give it the serious concern that I think is the residents expect of us. So I will support the motion, but hopefully we'll still be in the striving. It's worked for many years, so we should continue to support it.
Thank you. Commissioner Turpel?
Yes, I'm going to support the motion as well. I'm a little confused with acronyms, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That was not in my orientation when I became a commissioner. But and I have to echo the things that Commissioner Ferris said, except I really don't have discomfort. And the only reason why is because from the arborist point of view and the company that's going to be making that transplantation happen, there's a huge history, and it looks like these are probably going to be in a better place than where they're at right now. So I'm kind of excited about that, but I do have to echo that I think that this system should stay in place with more than 3 oak trees. I think it's good that this body at least takes a look at it. I also want to just drop off that once again I think staff just hit the ball out of the park. Mr. Kearns, you did a wonderful job, and it makes me feel really good when the applicants work with staff to make a project like this go smoothly. So I'll support the motion.
Any other comments? No. And I'll give you final word. I just wanted to say that I support the motion. I'm very happy that it could be worked out that there's reasonable use of this property by moving these trees. Excuse me, I'm very supportive of personal property rights. And, gee, I'd love a big house like that as long as it had maybe a shooting gallery in it or something. But I think it's beautiful what they're doing. It only adds to our community. Everybody's always in awe of the large house up on the hill. And it's wonderful to see young people that can go and maybe get their dream. And I'm very pleased with the project, and again with staff, and of course with all of your staff, Mr. Toll, that we met with up there. They were wonderful and very accommodating to us to take us around in vehicles to see the property. I would never vote for one project that I never see or step foot on. I just have done that for years, and I'm very familiar with the Lake Sherwood project. I was on the County Planning Commission to vote for the last golf course it was put on, and that was the big thing, was again about Mr. Murdoch moving trees and his success rate, and it's always been a wonderful thing that he has done out there. So with that, I'll ask Mr. Tapking. Did you want to say something again, Mr. Ferris?
If I may, I just as a last little bit on something that you had brought up about reasonable use of his property. I do want to make clear, at least from my standpoint, I can support the findings because we are not stating that they need reasonable conforming use of their property to do this. It is because it's consistent with the intent of the oak tree ordinance. My belief is they've got plenty of reasonable and conforming use on their property, but I can support it because of that finding. So I just wanted to call that
right.
out.
But I'll come back at you and say there's nothing worse than carrying groceries through a breezeway. It's so nice to have a garage attached to the house. So with that, final words, Mr. Tapking.
Right, I appreciate the support. Most appropriately, Tom, I think it's important that you put together a team of people that really dedicated to making this work for it. You indicated when we had a chance to meet out on your property how important this was. And every member of your staff that we had a chance to chat with, and when we went up there and physically looked at the property, made that point. It is rare when we get a chance many times to see a property of this style or oak trees or developments where the cooperation existed from the very beginning. When we talked about moving the oak trees, I was very familiar with the firms that were doing this. It's like, this is a no-brainer. Let's get these things into an area where they're going to be healthy and put them into a spot that makes more sense. The design elements that you've incorporated into your personal retreat, I think are, I hope, more appropriately, will serve you for a long time in this area. So I think from the Commission, from my perspective very specifically, it's exciting to see the city staff and your staff work together in a very cooperative fashion to make something like this happen. So thank you very much for doing that.
Okay, and with that, would you please vote?
Motion passed 5-0.
Thank you, and there is a 10-day right of appeal on the project. And we'll continue on with case 6C. If the clerk would please open the case.
Hearing advertised as required by law is hereby open to consider agenda item 6C regarding case Z 2010-70185, TTM 2010-70187, RPD 2010-70179, OTP 2010-70181, LTP 2012-70078, EIR number 330. Applicant, KSK Investments, LP. Request, consider environmental impact report number 330, pre-zoning to residential plan development with maximum of 0.56 dwelling units per net acre. Divide 27.29 acres into 14 residential lots and 1 open space lot. Construct 14 single-family dwellings. Remove 1 oak tree and encroach and dead wood on 5 oak trees. Prune 1 landmark tree and encroach on 2 landmark trees. location 2000 Upper Ranch Road.
Thank you. And good evening, Ms. Leopold. You'd like to give the staff report?
Yes, thank you, Chair Reynolds. Chair Reynolds and members of the Commission, for your consideration this evening, there are 5 different applications for Planning Commission review and consideration this evening. Essentially, there is a legislative action on the pre-zoning application, and all of these applications will go forward to the City Council for final consideration at a future date. Essentially, the pre-zoning to residential plan development with a maximum of 0.56 units per acre, single-family dwelling. There is a tract map to divide the property into 14 residential lots and 1 open space lot. Also, there's a residential plan development permit to allow the construction of 14 custom single-family homes. Also, an oak tree permit to remove 1 oak tree, deadwood, and encroach on 5 oak trees. A landmark tree permit to prune 1 landmark tree, which is a walnut, and encroach upon 2 other landmark trees, a walnut and a toyon. There's also, for the environmental document, an environmental impact report number 330. This is an aerial perspective of the property. Currently, it's in the county, and essentially, it's approximately 27.29 acres. With regard to the access points, there will be an access point on the southeastern portion there of which accesses onto Canaan Road. There's also an access point on Upper Ranch Road. To the east of the property are approximately 9 single-family custom homes of tract 4023. There are also custom homes further to the east, which is tract 4119 High Country. This is Rayburn Street and High Knoll Circle. To the immediate east, there is a project that was approved back in 2008. This consists of 5 custom homes for approximately 13 acres or so. This is looking northeast on the property. The existing ranch house is in the distance there in the center, and various outbuildings, which I believe were constructed somewhere in the 1960s. You can see some of the oak trees on the property, and we'll expand on those a little bit later in the presentation. This is looking southeast at the adjacent tract 5707. This was considered by the Planning Commission back in March 10th, 2008, and approved by the City Council on April 8th, 2008. It was consisting of 13.3 acres. As I mentioned, 5 custom homes were approved for this property, and it had encroachment into 25% slope terrain. This is looking southwest on the property towards Brunston Court, the subject of the previous hearing this evening. To the left, you can see the existing home there at 3970 Brunston. Also, the 9 custom homes on tract 4023 are to the west. This again is another slide looking directly to the west. The Edison access road and easement is in the far north on the right-hand side, and the custom homes on Upper Ranch Road of tract 4023. The planning process, essentially the City Council initiated the annexation of this property on June 22nd, 2010. The Planning Commission will make a recommendation on these applications, and City Council will have the final action on the applications. Also, the Ventura County Local Agency Formation Commission, LAFCO, will consider the annexation. The pre-zoning application, existing, the zoning is county open space with a 20-acre minimum with a scenic resource protection overlay zone. The proposed zoning is residential plan development with a maximum, again, of 0.56 dwelling units per net acre, single-family detached. And this is consistent with adjacent zoning. It's also consistent with the general plan designation of very low density residential, which consists of 0 to 2 dwelling units per net acre. The tentative tract application involves subdividing approximately 27.29 acres into 14 residential lots and 1 open space lot of 2.5 acres. This is a table, shows you a comparison of the lot size, and it shows you that the lot size is consistent with adjacent tracts. For the proposed tract, we're looking at a median lot size of 1.4 acres. For the Upper Ranch Road area, tract 4023 to the west, the median lot size is 2.5 acres. And further to the east, High Knoll Circle, Rayburn area, that median lot size is 1.6 acres. The tentative tract map shows you the open space lot on the north, which is lot 15. And to the south, of course, you see the 14 lots arranged. The access, again, is off of Upper Ranch Road, and another access point further to the east is off of Canaan Road. The grading is balanced with cut and fill quantities. I believe it was 72,552 cubic yards. The residential plan development involves 9 single-story dwellings with a 21-foot maximum height, 5 two-story dwellings with 27-foot maximum height, 2 gated entrances, and a 20-foot wide landscape privacy buffer on the west side, which is adjacent to the existing residences of tract 4023 Upper Ranch Road. This 20-foot wide landscape privacy buffer is deed restricted. The residential plan development, the pad size is larger than the adjacent tracts. And this is due to the fact that the other tracts of Upper Ranch Road, tract 4023, and High Knoll Circle, Rayburn, 4119, essentially have a lot of undeveloped slope areas which are restricted for development. So you have smaller lots, but larger pads. And the median pad size proposed is 37,548 square feet. Or acres, I'm sorry. No, that's square feet. Residential plan development continued. All homes will be custom, subject to individual precise plan design permits and architectural review. And this is consistent with other processes for the tract 4023 Upper Ranch Road, Rayburn Street and High Knoll Circle, tract 4119. This is a photo simulation of the development. As you can see in the center there is a cul-de-sac, or a roundabout rather. You have B Street, B Court coming up off of that roundabout, and A Street, which continues through the tract and accesses Canaan Road on the far east end. The oak tree permit, all on-site oak trees are preserved in place. There is removal of 1 off-site oak tree for street access. This tree is tree 123C, as called out in the oak tree report. This tree was previously reviewed as a part of tract 5707, but at that time the tree was too small to be considered under the oak tree ordinance, and has since grown in size and is now considered to be considered by the oak tree ordinance for preservation and protection. However, it does need to be removed, and it would be removed with regard to Track 5707's improvements for street access, and essentially it's requested at this time to be removed for those improvements to create the secondary access on Canaan. There's also encroachment and deadwooding on 5 oak trees. There are 4 on-site oak trees that, and 1 off-site oak tree. Oak tree number 123C, this is a photo of it. This is the one that is requested for removal. It will be replaced by 2 24-inch box and 1 36-inch box oak tree in accordance with the oak tree protection guidelines. Oak tree encroachments, there are 2 trees, tree number 125 and 126 in the upper left. Those trees are on the very border of this particular tract in Tract 5707. The encroachments will consist of perimeter track fencing. The tree on the right-hand side, in the lower right, is tree number 667 on Lot 6, and that tree is requested for encroachment for property line fencing. Landmark tree permit, the request is to prune 1 landmark tree, which is a black walnut in the open space, Lot 15, and encroach upon 2 landmark trees, a walnut, Lot 12, and a toy on Lot 13. This is a photo of the black walnut tree in the open space lot. This tree was severely damaged. It has previous fire damage and also a lot of decay. It's in a hazardous condition, and our oak tree consultant, or our landmark oak tree consultant, is suggesting that pruning would be beneficial to this tree. This is a toyon tree on Lot 13. It's adjacent to the aviary, and it's requested for encroachment simply due to removal of the aviary and the concrete foundation that's adjacent to it. This is a black walnut tree on Lot 12, which is essentially requiring some encroachment with a minor retaining wall. The EIR overview, essentially an originally prepared mitigated neg deck document number 280 was prepared, and essentially when we received the comments, the applicant and staff agreed that an EIR would be prepared in response to those comments on the MND. The EIR reviewed all required topics, including aesthetics, air quality, biological resources, land use, and traffic. Also, the impacts are able to be mitigated to less than a significant level, and all mitigation measures are incorporated into conditions of approval for the project. The project EIR alternatives, essentially the alternative analysis required by CEQA to identify options that could avoid or reduce significant impacts, and there were no significant impacts to reduce in this particular project. The project alternatives, essentially there was a no project alternative. This presumes that Ventura County land use and zoning would remain as is. LAFCO would require annexation to the city prior to any development to occur, and any proposal has to be or has to provide reasonable use of the property. Secondly, there's an alternative location. There were no other potentially feasible sites available to meet the applicant's objectives. Thirdly, a modified design alternative. This was to eliminate lots 3, 4, and 14. These are the lots adjacent to tract 4023 on the western portion of the property. This would provide an increase in open space. However, it would also provide brush clearance outside of the existing Southern California Edison easement and a minor decrease in Class 2 impacts. This is also called out as the environmentally superior alternative. However, the applicant has provided a letter in one of the supplemental packets that states that this alternative is not economically feasible and does not meet the project objectives. Conclusion, proposed density is consistent with the general plan. Proposed lot size and pad size are comparable to or larger than adjacent tracts, and the applicant has met with the Westlake North Property Owners Association and nearby residents in an effort to address concerns. Staff recommends that Planning Commission recommend approval of the pre-zoning, tract map residential plan development permit, the oak tree permit, the landmark tree permit, the final EIR, and the mitigation monitoring plan to the City Council as described in the staff report, subject to all recommended conditions of approval. Staff is available to answer any questions. We have John Ennis, who is our oak tree, landmark tree consultant, available. Rick Burgess, who prepared the EIR document. We also have members of Public Works available.
Thank you. Are there questions of staff? Ms. Leopold, would you just say something about the change to condition 144?
Yes, that was in one of your supplemental packets, I believe, in the first supplemental packet. That condition essentially is requested to be modified so that an exception can be made for the HOA access for open space, to the open space lot. So essentially, we need to add that one exception to provide direct access and a gate to the open space lot 15.
And has the applicant approved that change in that condition?
Yes, they have. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any? Commissioner Ferris.
Thank you. So it's the property is currently in the county and it's zoned as was it, you said 20 acre minimum, but that's effectively what, 0.05 units per acre? Is that
correct?
If I'm doing the math right.
Yes.
That would still be consistent with our general plan if we were to annex it and did nothing. I'm just looking at the alternatives, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Other questions of staff? Okay, with that, I'll call the cards. And we have quite a few, so each speaker will have, let me see, 6, 7. Well, I know some of them are for questions only. So the applicant will have 50 minutes, and each speaker thereafter will have 3 minutes. And the first speaker is Mr. Leonard Liston. If you'd come forward, state your name and city of residence, please. Sure.
Ready?
Good evening, yes.
Good evening. Good evening, Chair, Commissioners. Leonard Liston. I'm president of LC Engineering Group, located here in Thousand Oaks on Pierce Court. My offices have been here in town for over 30 years. And dating back actually to when I was in college at Moore Park, some of my college classes did some of the initial surveying of Westlake Boulevard as it was extending into North Ranch, which then was just a big field. And we surveyed a lot of the archaeological sites. It was a lot of the studies that were going on then. And over the past 30 years in town here, my offices provide engineering services on hundreds of projects in the North Ranch area, including a lot of those adjacent to and surrounding the Miller Ranch property. And in fact, I personally developed 4 custom homes in the North Ranch area. Some of them, they're just the streets away from this property. So I'm intimately familiar with the city and the North Ranch community. I'm here representing the owner, which is KSK Investments, and the owners of Miller Ranch. And they're here in the audience, Ron Senchuk and Mark Kestenbaum. And Mark will be speaking a little later on the project. I'm also here tonight to speak in favor of the project is actually a member of the Miller family, Jane Russell Wooster. And she will also be speaking and giving a little bit of historical perspective on the Miller Ranch and some of the surrounding developments, which is a very interesting talk, by the way. Then we also have the team consultants here who are in support of the project. We have Nancy Schreiner, which, as you know, was in the city attorney's office here for 15 years, and so she's going to be addressing some of the conditions and some of the more technical things. We have Joe Gibson of Meridian Consultants, our environmental consulting firm, who is also on the board of the Conejo Recreation Park District Directors. We have James Dean, old-timer here in Thousand Oaks, our landscape architect, not the old Jim, landscape architect and oak tree consultant that has been in this area for over 40 years, and he's here to answer any questions. Just quickly regarding architects, at this time, we've interviewed a number of architects, mainly looking at some of the local architects, most of whom you know. We continue to interview architects, and because of the custom nature of this project, there's going to be many architects providing design, and so we continue to do that. The architectural design is a little out in front of us, although you see on this rendering, which you have in your packet as well, we provide some conceptual designs, not that they're specific plans, but just to give you a feel of what the project's going to look like when it was completed. So as my presentation, first I want to thank the city staff for their hard work and diligence. It's been a long time, and dedication in working with us and designing the project that's now in front of you. We actually first went to the city over 3 years ago, sometime around July 2009. Wow, time flies. And so in our initial meetings with the city, I went and met with John Prescott, a number of people, Mark, a number of people, and just to talk with the city and see what their expectations were for this property, what their general plan was. If you look at the city map, you see a little dot inside the city, and that's Miller Ranch. It was just one of the last piece of property that wasn't annexed. It's all completely surrounded by the city of Thousand Oaks. So over the past 3 years, we've been working with the city staff and the surrounding community to work toward the project that is, again, now in front of you, and trying to take in all of the expectations and requirements and general plan that's been around for a long time into consideration, and the comments of the community as well. Now, when KSK first came to my office, they had with them a tentative track map that was prepared by a local firm that had proposed 22 residential lots with no open space. And I looked at that and, said a little aggressive, and from my experience with North Ranch, probably not the best solution. That was the map that we first took to the city when we started our initial discussions with the city, and this is what KSK was thinking. And again, we ended up at 14 lots, which we all agree is a real fitting and optimum development for the property. Once we first went to the city and because the first thing we wanted to do is go with the city and see what their plans were for the project and get the city's our understanding of what the city was looking at. Once we did that, then we started our community outreach in efforts in working with the city, because of course we're the last development in the neighborhood, and so we're the guys coming in last, and we have a lot of neighbors, and so and one of the people that's going to be speaking later, I'm sure, is Leo Orange, one of our direct neighbors right at the entry. He's down at this lower corner of the property here. And so we set up, our initial meeting was at the North Ranch Country Club, which we hosted in July of 2010. And this rendering's been around for that long. We have some other renderings, one other rendering I'm going to show you, or maybe it's down there, of the entry. And so we brought those renderings, now that we had talked to the city and got some understanding of what the city wanted, and kind of got a project that we could present. So we knew what we had. We went to the community. And since that initial meeting, we've actually met with the Westlake North Property Owners Association several times, the Westlake Ranch Property Owners Association, and we spoke with all of these and sent them our design packet, which included these renderings and the tentative track map and some of the statistics. We sent that to Ben Johnson Fairway Homes, Island Forest, Emerald Forest, North Ranch Country Club Estates, Fairgreen HOA, and High Country Association. So I think we tried to hit them all. Hopefully we didn't miss anybody. We actually consulted with Tom Oswald, the local architect who's involved in some of these communities, and kind of helped us direct us to these various HOAs so that we could present to them. And then we've had follow-up meetings and realized that in all of our meetings, whether it was actual physical meetings we had or telephone calls or packets that we sent out followed up by telephone calls, we've really received very little direct communication from the community. We've obviously had some over these past 3 years, but for the most part, except for a few people probably going to speak tonight, nobody that had any objections to the project. And through that community outreach, and I think at the same time through our meetings with the city, we voluntarily, and a lot of the stuff Pam already touched on, we voluntarily agreed to upgrade the environmental study from a mitigated negative deck, which was completed, and to a full environmental impact report. And we did that because we wanted to make sure, as did the city, that the project was environmentally sound. And part of that came from some of the comments of the community, so we said, the owners decided, let's go ahead and upgrade to environmental impact report. Needless to say, that added a lot of time and cost, but, again, the owner's been very patient. We did that. We agreed that of the 14 homes, 9 were selected to be single stories. And what we agreed to do is to put the 5 of the single-story lots, at least, on lots 1, 2, 3, 7, and 8, because those are our lots that adjoin our neighboring properties where there's houses. So we put single-family lots on our lots too, just to kind of be more consistent with that. And also, as we mentioned earlier, I'm going to actually talk about here, we also created a landscape buffer, which is 20 feet along the westerly property line of our property, to again create some additional screening, in a heavily landscaped, and James Dean may talk about that later, but we have a landscape plan that was submitted to the Planning Commission. So we've done a couple of things. We limited 3 lots along that west property line. We located the lots that kind of jog our home locations to the next ones. We limited them to single-family homes, and we provided a 20-foot buffer. All of this to try to, again, because we're the infill project, we want to be respectful to our neighbors, and as much as they want to maintain their privacy, so do the owners of our future homes want to have privacy as well, because people move to North Ranch because you have larger homes, and loans, but you have that privacy. I didn't mean to say that; it just came out. So, and the other thing that we agreed to do, and again, this becomes timing because we have 14 homes, is we agreed, or the owners agreed, to develop the site, to do all of the site work, which would be the site grading, the infrastructure, which is the street and the utilities, the gated entries, and probably more importantly, or as important, all of the common area landscaping and all the slope landscaping, all that's going to be done in a single phase. So that equipment comes in, does all that work, builds the streets, builds the grading. So after they leave, the only thing that's left is just building homes. So it just minimizes that disturbance, if you will, to the neighborhood. And we've estimated, and we've been dealing with a lot of contractors in the area, we've estimated about 6 months to complete that process. Now, as far as some of the project statistics, as Pam said, the Miller Ranch is just slightly over 27 acres. We are offering 2.5 acres to be dedicated to open space, and that's either going to be controlled by the city or by the HOA, but all development rights are going to be deeded to the city. There is a trail, Casca Trail, I guess, that actually goes through that property and bends down into ours. And if you look at our tentative, there's a kind of a funny little kink above Lot 14, I think. And we did that to preserve that trail so we wouldn't have to regrade that trail and can leave that alone. And that's why that little kink is in there at the top. The lots themselves, again, as Pam stated, they're just over 1 acre to just under 3 acres. The average is 1.1 2/3 acres, and that's consistent with not only the lots immediately adjacent to us on Upper Ranch Road, but also in the high country in general. That's very consistent. The density, which I think is 0.53 or some number, is lower than the densities around us. So, again, we made it a conscious, after some time, a conscious choice to reduce the scope from the 22, actually went from 22 to 18 and got down to 14, and it seemed to be the right spot. Everything seemed to fit and work for us. We also, and actually I have a graph, hopefully it's right here. It's got a bunch of numbers on it. And what we did is we wanted to show the consistency of our development. We wanted to show the consistency with the surrounding properties, and probably particularly Upper Ranch Road, because our only direct neighbors are the 3 lots on Upper Ranch Road and the one to the south of us, the old James Rasmussen property, which I actually engineered. Those are the only 3 properties that really abut our property. Otherwise, we have open space on the north and on the east. 2 of those properties, which were the recently approved tract 5707, KSK purchased those properties so we could provide that second access. And then there's the other properties are over the hill from that. So we don't really have those. We only have really 4 neighbors that are immediately adjacent to us. So we looked at this property is kind of unique. You know, I've again provided a lot of engineering and developed a lot of properties in North Ranch. And the unique thing about this property is the topography is pretty flat. Most of the high country area is pretty rolling hill, so you might have larger lots, but your usable pad area is pretty small. Remember, we had those old development circles? We're always trying to squeeze those, get those a little bit bigger to try to fit your development in there. And in this one, we took a look at the pad areas, the usable pad areas for the homes or the lots that are on Upper Ranch Road, and they ranged, let me make sure I got this right. Now, our usable pad area ranged from 0.6 to 0.6 acres to 1.2 acres, average about 0.9 acres. So these lots, the proposed lots on Miller Ranch, have just under an acre, basically flat of usable land. You know, you compare that to the homes on Upper Ranch Road, and they vary from 0.3 to 1.2, so they have an average usable area of 0.7, which is about 30 or 35% less. And when it comes to, and tract 5707 is even smaller yet. So with these 14 homes, we're able to provide a nice, larger than most usable pad area. And as a matter of fact, one of the things that we were allowed to do in this is provide tennis courts. Again, you're restricted to no lighting and all that other stuff's got to be sunken, but tennis courts are a very nice feature, and this is one of the projects that actually allow for that. And the rendering that you have here and that you've seen in your packet, again, this dates back 3 years when we first got involved in this project, maybe not 3 years, but 2.5 years. And we developed the layout that we now have, the one that's in front of you. We went to artists and went to some architects, some local architects, and got some plans. Because a picture's worth 1,000 words, and if you look at something, you can see what it's going to look like when it's completed. And it was important for the community, you know, for us to a lesser extent, but for the community and for the city staff, so they can see what are they approving, what's it really going to look like when it's done. And I think this gives a really good demonstration of that. It shows the large lots that we're going to have. We put in a turnaround with a little feature in the center. I'm almost done. And the custom nature of the house and the open space that's behind it. And here, what looks like open space is that there's the 2 lots on 5707 are right here, and this rolls over to the other side. So we really, again, only have those 4 neighbors. So, an extensive landscaping. So I'll close with this. I just want to once again thank the city staff, and for that matter, the owners, to have the patience, it's been 3 years, as I've said, to allow this project to evolve to its current design, which is, I think without question, consistent with the North Ranch community, and I think we can all agree that it'll be a tremendous asset to the area.
Thank you.
Just took a few minutes too much.
Are there any questions of the speaker?
And I'm here to answer any questions all night, too.
Thank you. And our next speaker is Mark Nestenbaum. If you come forward, state your name and city residence, please.
Sure. Hello.
And you have 3 minutes.
Okay. Hi, good evening. My name is Mark Kestenbaum. My city residence is Beverly Hills. I am one of the owners of KSK Investments, the developer of the project and the applicant. I'm here to speak on behalf of the proposed project, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have at the end. First of all, please excuse me. Some of my information might be a little bit repetitive after piggybacking on Leonard, the project engineer here, so I hope you'll excuse me. As you know, the project being proposed is 14 lots ranging in size from 1.1 acres to 3.7 acres. The lots will be for high-end custom homes. The graded pad areas, the usable areas, will range from 0.6 acres to 1.2 acres, with 5 of the 14 lots having over 1 acre that's going to be flat. The project will also dedicate 2.5 acres of space to the north that will be considered open space dedicated to the city. That represents nearly 10% of the project. When we originally came to the city and met with staff, we did propose 22 lots. The city encouraged us to go back and think about it a little bit, and we did, and we sharpened our pencils. We tried to figure it out, and we came up eventually with a project that we thought was very consistent with the surrounding community at 14 lots. At the same time, during this process, we also met with some of the other city agencies, and it became apparent that we needed a second point of ingress and egress to the project off of Canaan Road. And to do that, we had to go and meet with our neighbors at the time and basically purchase that access at, you know, it was a little bit steep of a price, but we were able to do it, and we got it done. And it took us about a year and a half to complete that transaction. Once we kind of got everything in order, we also spent a lot of time meeting with the HOAs and with our local neighbors. We had 2 meetings, and through the evolution of that process, we did do some pretty significant things. We limited, 9 of the homes, the majority of the homes, to 1-story houses. We only have 3 homes on the western border to kind of line up with the 3 homes on Upper Ranch Road. We agreed to a 20-foot landscape buffer on the west side of the property. All the grading and utility, as Leonard pointed out, will be done in a single phase. We've dressed up the entrance off Canaan Road to encourage more people to use that as opposed to Upper Ranch Road. And during the last 3.5 years, as a result of going through the process, obviously we've incurred substantial holding costs, pre-development expenses for engineers, architects, consultants, attorneys, tree experts, and the like. We had to purchase that second point of ingress, egress, dedicate the 2.5 acres to the north. And in today's world, the truth is that single-family development isn't what it was 3-4 years ago. The margins are slimmer, and when we had 22 homes, we had a much, larger profit margin, probably somewhere in the range of 10 to 15%. But as the project got reduced down to 14 homes, our profit margin also shrunk, and now it's a tight deal. And so I just wanted to, state that the 11-unit or the 11-lot alternative doesn't pencil. It's not feasible for us. And I know I'm out of time, so I beg your indulgence. I just want to finish up by saying, as a point of reference, KSK only owns this property in Thousand Oaks. It owns the 2 lots below. It does own those, but those are not of a similar size and nature for development. They don't match up. And I would like to conclude by saying the project is consistent with the general plan and consistent with the size and scale of the surrounding homes in the community. Thank you, and I'm sorry for going over time. Thank you.
Questions of the speaker? Okay, thank you. The next speaker is Jane Wooster. If you come forward, state your name and city residence, please.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Jane Russell Wooster, and I live in San Lucas, California. I'm here to tell you what I remember about 2000 Upper Ranch Road, which is a parcel of land that was owned by my aunt, Patricia Russell Miller, until her death in 2002. My aunt was raised in the Conejo Ranch that included this area of Thousand Oaks where we're now meeting. In 1966, she traded her house that was right here, Westlake Boulevard, across the freeway, for 27-plus acres that is now 2000 Upper Ranch Road, which sits on the hill behind the fire station at the intersection of Canaan and Upper Ranch Road. I would like to tell you how she traded her house for property well out of the sphere of development and of how development caught up with her. In 1966, we would get to my aunt's new house by driving up what is now Westlake Boulevard, but was then a one-lane Simi Road. Just past what is now Canaan Road, but at the time was only a gulch, we would turn east, go through a wire gate, up through the cattle pasture, through another gate to access her property. As I remember it, there was one house between my aunt's house and Highway 101. By 1970, Prudential Insurance Company of America had partnered with American Hawaiian for the further development of Westlake Village, and in 1972, American Hawaiian had requested that North Ranch be annexed to the city of Thousand Oaks. It wasn't until about 1985 that things began to roll in Upper Ranch. Then development of Track 3826 on the south side of Canaan Road was approved. Track 4119 on the north side of Canaan Road was approved. Track 4022 west of Westlake Boulevard at the Canaan Road intersection was approved. In December 1986, my aunt's driveway access was moved so that the land between her property and Westlake Boulevard, now Track 4023, could be developed. The new common area owned by the Westlake North Homeowners Association blocked her access. This group includes the homeowners on the cul-de-sac at Upper Ranch Road who are now reportedly protesting the development of what was my aunt's property. Also in 1986, the city of Thousand Oaks promised that the balance of Westlake Boulevard would be extended to Avenida de los Arboles. And in 1988 or 89, that project was completed, and it included the removal of 96 oak trees and resulted in increased traffic. Houses were duly built adjacent to my aunt's property, first across Canaan Road, and then immediately in front of her property with the backyard lawns of the houses on Upper Ranch Road extending right to her property line. Later, they squeezed in the fire station at the corner and built one more house along her property line. During this time, various representatives of Prudential Insurance Company came to see her in an effort to buy her property. At one point, they told her to go pick out whatever she wanted, and they would buy it and arrange a trade. It did not surprise us that she did not sell. She wanted to live there for the rest of her life. She did not make a secret that she thought after she died, she expected the property to be annexed to the city of Thousand Oaks. She fully expected the property to eventually be developed like everything surrounding her, except the municipal open space to the north. My personal opinion is that the most productive use for this property is development. And I would have to say, if development on this property is denied, one would certainly question why the surrounding area was suitable for development, but this acreage was not. It's nice to be back in Thousand Oaks.
Thank you very much. Any questions of the speaker? Thank you. And the next speaker is Nancy Schreiner. If you'd like to come forward, state your name and city of residence, and welcome back to our chambers. You used to sit up here when I first came on.
Good evening, Chair Reynolds, Planning Commissioners. It's a pleasure to be back before you, in an opposite position, though, that's for sure. I'm Nancy Kirsten Schreiner, Nordman, Carmody, here in Compton. I am outside legal counsel to the applicant. And I live in unincorporated Camarillo area of the county. The applicant accepts all of the conditions, including the revised condition 144 in the supplemental packet. The applicant has not requested any waivers or variances of standard conditions and standards of the city. The applicant concurs with the findings proposed by staff. And I'd like to point out that the project has no Class 1 significant environmental impacts. The subject property has been reflected in the city's general plan as very low density, 0 to 2 dwelling units net acreage since 1970. It has been reflected for over 42 years. This proposed development is not new or different from what the city has envisioned since 1970. The neighbors have had knowledge of this information since it's been public documents since 1970, although they may not have had their developments until the later 80s. The applicant is proposing very large custom estate homes of similar size, design, aesthetic quality of the surrounding neighborhood. The project has upscale and exclusive landscaping and entry features equal to or exceeding the surrounding properties. The subject property is not pristine. It is an existing single legal parcel in excess of 27 acres. It is developed with a home and accessory ranch buildings. It has been disturbed due to fuel modification and brush clearance, grading activities, and ranching activities for numerous years. The development has been surrounded by development all around it, as noted by the previous speakers. The Miller family, as noted, had to move their driveway to accommodate development. I'd like to address the alternative site design that's been proposed. As noted in my letter of September 7th, it is not economically feasible, as mentioned by the applicant. The proposed site design alternative eliminates an additional approximately 7 acres from the site, in addition to the 2.5 acres that are being proposed for open space. It is not economically feasible due to the value of the land, the infrastructure, and the upscale aesthetics that are being provided to this project so that it is compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. The 2.5 acres that's being provided as open space is of a high land value, and as a result, since it is a condition of the project, there is no tax deduction for that property. It is actually basically a gift to the city, the value of that land. Finally, I'd like to mention that it is a rule of reason, as noted in my letter, that it's not economically feasible, and I believe we've provided evidence of that. And I'm here to answer any questions if you have any.
Any questions of the speaker? Guess not.
Thank you.
Nancy. Thank you. I have 2 cards for questions only. Mr. Joe Gibson, if you have questions of his environmental group, and also of James Dean, who is the Oak Tree. No questions on that? Okay, then I'll continue on with the other cards. And Mr. Neil McGuire, if you'd like to come forward, state your name and city of residence, and you have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Chair Reynolds
evening.
and members of the Commission. My name is Neil McGuire. I'm a land use attorney with Alston & Bird here in the city. I'm a resident of Moore Park. Before I get started, I was wondering if another speaker could dedicate her time to me so that I could have 6 minutes total, given the extra time that the applicant speakers have also had.
Just speaking for one person is giving up their time?
Yes,
or...
Marie Orange.
Okay, then it's quite all right for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Before I get started into the substance of my comments, I also wanted to note that we sent in 100 letters from residents throughout the North Ranch community in opposition to this development project. They should be in your supplemental packets. This city, like many others, continuously grapples with decisions regarding growth and development. For example, about a year ago, this commission considered and recommended approval of the Teal Boulevard specific plan. And I recall the debate over that plan, including comments that the city of Teal was turning more and more into the valley. And tonight, this commission has an opportunity to affirm that the city is committed to preserving the Conejo Valley way of life. We can do so by focusing our growth in areas like Teal Boulevard while preserving our open space and rural properties. The most important land use approval before the city is the developer's proposed annexation of Miller Ranch into the city. Currently, Miller Ranch is unincorporated property and is zoned as open space. It is also located in a resources conservation district, as well as a park service area, both of which is noted in the staff report. These designations both illustrate that this property was designated and was intended to remain open space and rural in nature. Under the county's existing open space zoning, the residential development would be limited to the existing home on the property. Importantly, the decision whether to annex Miller Ranch is completely discretionary. This means that, as with a conditional use permit, for example, even one that would be consistent with the general plan, the developer has no right to the annexation, a point that has been confirmed by the California appellate courts. One opinion stated that the prospect that one's property might become more valuable if it is annexed to the city is a pleasant contemplation for a landowner, but it is certainly not a vested right. And so the question tonight becomes whether the city should exercise its discretion to annex Miller Ranch. There is no reason to do so here. First, the proposed development does not have a public benefit to the community, such as the fire station on Upper Ranch Road, or the park across from Canaan Road that is associated with a prior development in the area that has been discussed by the project applicant and their representatives in their discussion of the historical development of this area. There was development in this area, but they provided a community benefit. There is no benefit here. I would like staff, if possible, later to comment on the usability of the open space lot that is being proposed by the developer, and whether that property could be developed at all if they were so inclined. Second, as you've seen from the letters, the community does not support the annexation. Mr. Liston noted that there were many community meetings, but no community support for the project. We met with Mr. Liston, and we attempted to have further discussions, and we were declined in those discussions. And we were told that the applicant was going to run through the project as it's currently proposed. And some of our modifications at that time had included potentially reducing the lots, et cetera, including the something along the lines of the reduced alternative that you've heard the applicant talk about in terms of economic infeasibility. And so I'd like to address that point because it was raised in the supplemental packet and by the speaker. Within CEQA, you certainly can reject an alternative project on economic infeasibility grounds, and the applicant's letter went through a lot of the case law supporting that. What was ignored in that letter, though, is what's required to reject that, which is an actual study that is substantial evidence that runs through a quantitative analysis of what the proposed project is, what the alternative would be, what the difference is, the delta, and why that cannot be justified on an economic basis. We don't have that here. We have simply a conclusory statement from the applicant saying that it's a tough economy and they can't do it. But CEQA is very clear. There's a case out of San Diego saying this, that that's not justification for rejecting that alternative without the quantitative analysis. I would like to also get back to one point that was raised with regard to the timing of the project and the study. I would like to thank city staff, first of all, for going and recommending that an EIR be done. We had asked for that. Kathy Schutz at Westlake HOA had asked for that as well. And it was done, and it was beneficial because the applicant here had been relying on a biological study from 2007 that had been associated with another project, a prior project, not by this applicant. And the biological study was done end of summer, and we had asked for a new study to be done during the spring nesting survey. And that was done, and guess what? There's sensitive species on site. There's an endangered species on site. We received the EIR last week. It was made available to us last Tuesday. We're reviewing it. Our consultant is still reviewing it. We don't agree with all of the measures. I did think it was the mitigation measures and whether they're sufficient enough. I did think it was worth noting that that analysis was done, and there were some conclusions that, again, lead to the concept that, you know, this is a property that is worth protecting. We think it should be protected in full. It's existing open space. That's all the developer has a right to. Let's leave it that way. The folks that moved here, they went, they checked out the land use plans. They saw it was open space. That was their expectation. The developer does not have a right to annex the property, and we would request that you deny that, recommend denial of that proposal. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions? Mr. McGuire? Any questions, Mr. McGuire? I'd like to ask you a question. You were saying that the property owners want it left as open space, but then you talk about that you wanted them to reduce the number of houses. Well, if you're opposed to them changing the zoning, I'm confused.
Yep, most definitely. Chairman, we are opposed to any development whatsoever. In the spirit of cooperation, you know, I had raised different topics, including reducing the lots, including purchasing the property, different things that we could talk about. I met with Mr. Liston in his offices in December of 2010. These were concepts that were floated, and they were all declined. There was just no response on either of them.
So you don't want anything there, or the property owners?
The existing open space should be preserved. Leave it in the county. Let them, you know, let's leave it as open space.
And were you aware of the general plan designation on the property?
I can't speak to the residents, but from what I've heard from the folks in North Ranch is that no, there was no. You know, it's easy to go and check the existing zoning. It's a little bit harder to go and check to see what the general plan looks like. Everybody saw that there was plans for a fire station, but folks did not see anything that there would be any proposal for an annexation. And I don't see how an annexation could be contemplated when there is no vested right to one. Again, the case law is very clear that whether in a sphere of influence, whether there's a general plan designation, should it get annexed, doesn't matter. There is no right to an annexation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Thank you. The next speaker, I'm sorry, is Nick Kidwai. Kidwai, I'm sorry. If you come forward, state your name and city residence. I'll pass your card so they can see what you wrote.
Nick Kidwai, not a resident of North Ranch, Director Concerned Citizen of Thousand Oaks. Honorable Chair, there was significant opposition originally to this project, but I think the applicant and everybody has worked with the neighbors and made a lot of changes. And I, for one, and a lot of my members support it. Our group is NIMBY in many ways, but you have to look at the overall good for the community. And the email that is in your packet tonight, I would like to just read one paragraph, and the absurdity of it should become evident. And I quote, "The congestion caused in the already dangerous area of Cannon Road with further increased noise, air pollution, valley fever potential, and traffic flow, including most importantly the ingress-egress on Upper Ranch Road for an extended period of time, not to mention the cumulative impact to the adjacent road networks for permanently impacting the wildlife corridor. This is the elimination of open space and will not benefit the city of Thousand Oaks." This is not open space. I mean, the gentle lady is here. If you read the letter, I mean, if they did not develop it in time, and it's the least amount of development that can be done on the property. It's absolutely disgusting that people treat, like myself, my front yard is my property, and I don't have a fence, and people drop their Pepsi bottles, they drop their KFC boxes there, and I end up picking it up. It's not open space. You can sit on the grass, I don't mind it, but don't make a mess. Let the people have the proper use of their property. They have bent over backwards to reduce it, and 16 or 17 homes is not going to impact the traffic. I'm working in Norwalk right now, and if you talk about traffic, I mean, even at all times of the day, I mean, going from one light to the other, West LA. In fact, we are working, and I asked the Planning Commission and others to join us in the project that's Canal Creek project in Camarillo, down the grade from us, 2,500 homes. It is zoned home, it's agricultural. That will create a traffic mess, and they're not entitled to it. They're escaping SOAR. Right to the city of Camarillo, there's no date on it, attend the meetings. That is a true use of NIMBYism, and these scare tactics don't work. I am really appreciative of the Russell family for coming forward and letting us know the history, and we fully support the project and hope they will mitigate some of these effects.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Leo Orange. If you'd come forward and state your name and city residence.
My name is Leo Orange. I'm a resident of Thousand Oaks on Upper Ranch Road. I first want to start by thanking Mr. Town for helping me with the petitions and with the packet that he got to you today. I'd like to kind of put yourself in my shoes real quick. When we moved to this area, the first thing I did was say what a beautiful town Thousand Oaks is and what a beautiful neighborhood North Ranch is. I did all my research. I went to the city of Ventura to make sure that this was open space. I've got a letter from them, an email that states this is open space, 1 home per 20 acre is what it's zoned for. I knew there was going to be a fire station on the corner, and I thought, that's great for me, a guy in my condition. I fall out of my wheelchair, I got the fireman down the corner. That's fantastic. I could live with that. It's nice to see Miss Russell here. My wife was Mrs. Miller's a Life Alert companion for 3 years as she was getting a little older. So I went up there 2-3 times a week to say hi to her. And the thing that I was afraid of was asking her, what are you going to do down here? She said, I hope somebody buys this property and has horses. I love horses. And it's open space. So that's the last thing I remember from her, with no disrespect, ma'am. I feel that the developers knew what they were buying. They were buying open space. And believe me, I'm an owner, a homeowner that believes in property rights. But this is open space. They're violating our rights as homeowners. I believe that when I bought this property, I bought it on one contingency when my wife and I started building our home. And it was that we thought that we'd live the rest of our lives out looking out at the beautiful Miller Ranch and enjoying what we saw. I think that it's going to take 7-8 years in this area to develop. I'm going to constantly, my backyard goes to what development's going to be. I'm going to be hearing hammers and nails and people going in and out. And the main corridor to come in is going to be off of Westlake to turn in by the fire station. And one home, we have 5 cars with 4 people. The average person up there is going to have 4 cars, without a doubt, 3 cars. And you're going to see nothing but traffic coming right up in that area. It's going to be hard getting in. It's going to be hard getting out. I know they have another entrance, but it's going to be very, very difficult. With that, I just want to make sure that you understand that there are 100 people right now and more coming in that are going to be against this project right in the neighborhood. They love the Miller Ranch the way it is. I mean, when Sylvester Stallone was up there looking at it, I wish he would have bought it. He would have had horses back there, I'm sure. With that, thank you very much, and I hope you deny the development of open space.
Thank you, Mr. Orange. The next card is Marie Orange. If you'll come forward and state your name and city of residence. Oh, okay. Thank you. And Mr. Rick Chiavaroli. Really? Nobody pronounces my name right. I'm shocked that I got yours. You come forward and state your name and city residence, please.
My name is Rick Chiavaroli. I reside at 2170 Upper Ranch Road in Thousand Oaks, California. I have had the privilege for the last 27 years of living in Ventura County, the last 14 on Upper Ranch Road, the 13 years before that in Oak Park, California. I, like many of us, saw the well-conceived and well-designed extension of Canaan Road from the end of the property at Oak Park High School to it connects now with Westlake Boulevard. By trade, I am in the insurance business, and one of the ways that I looked at the expansion of Canaan Road was how much thought and effort was put into the ingress and egress of every street that is there. And I think if you even looked at the records, you would see that the minimal amount of accidents we have on that road, because you have visual sight coming out of every street there, because this was a well-conceived and developed project from day one. Every one of those roads that are on there right now was in the original master plan. Now, so many years after the fact, we now come to a situation where, according to even Mr. Liston's own terms, this is the last development in the area and a dot on the map, and that's all it is, a dot of open space. I have concerns for the city of Thousand Oaks and for the residents in that area from a liability perspective. Because if you can only exit right going north on Canaan Road and you take human nature into consideration, first of all, let me describe the way that is. There is about a 7-degree down drop right there, and people come down there on their way going home from work, moving very quickly as far as that is. It's going to create a huge liability situation for either the county and or the city, depending on what happens. And human nature is going to be that everyone is going to be coming out of there, making a U-turn right in front of Fire Station 37, trying to go back south on Canaan Road. Now, I have lived there with the same understanding as Leo. I did all my homework when I moved in there 14 years ago, and it was open space. I used to watch Mrs. Miller's horse graze on the hill above us when she had a horse up there. And that was the design, I believe, of everyone here in Thousand Oaks to keep it that way. I urge you to keep that property open space. I thank you for your time. Does anyone have any questions?
Any questions to the speaker? No. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Marshall Gates is the next speaker. If you'll come forward and state your name and city of residence.
Good evening. My name is Marshall Gates. I'm a resident of Thousand Oaks. In fact, I'm a resident of North Ranch in the immediate community. And I'm a retired businessman. And I would have definitely considered myself to be pro-development. But I'm speaking in opposition of this project because I think the zoning laws are intended to protect the neighborhood as well as property owners. And in this case, I've been a resident of North Ranch for 15 years. I bought my property, which is adjacent to this property, 8 years ago, and naturally asked a number of questions about how the property was zoned, and was told that it was open space, one development for 20 acres, and that was something that I counted on. I'm actually the newest resident on the street, so we have all of us bought the property, and with the understanding that was zoned to be open space, only one house, and that's what we expected it to be. And we are now finding out that the developers want to develop 14 properties adjacent to our homes. I happen to be the one that doesn't have any open space buffer between the development and my property. And I just think for the community is better served by leaving it as it is and not approving the annexation. And so that I wanted to make that statement and to ask you to support the community.
Thank you. Questions to the speaker? Thank you very much, Mr. Gates. And the last card is Peter Sutton. If you come forward and state your name and city residence, and you have 3 minutes.
Peter Sutton, Thousand Oaks. Our home is right across the street from where this property is planned to be developed. Madam Chairman, you mentioned earlier this evening about it's nice to see people get their dream. And that struck me because in 2004, we bought the home, which is across the street from this property, again, reflecting what they said, that it was going to be open space. It took 2 years to remodel our home. It's a beautiful home. And now our dream is set to be turned into a nightmare. Mr. Liston, who says 6 months to build out the pads and build out that property, that's a joke. All of you, I'm sure, have built property, have developed property, and you know it takes 2-3 times longer, because I know in my remodel it took much, much longer and much, much more money to develop it. I read the document that was sent out on this project, and it said that they're going to work 6 days a week from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., including Saturdays. So am I supposed to say to my granddaughter when it's her time for her first communion party, sorry, dear, we can't have that party because we're going to be hearing diesel trucks and earth movers and dust blowing and noise for the next who knows how many years? And if they say 6 months, I'd like to challenge them on that, and I wish you would challenge them on that, because it's absolutely ridiculous. This is a nightmare that's going to happen, and we're going to be years on this project where we're going to have to sit there for 6 days a week, 12 hours a day listening to this. And what I would like to understand is who in the city is going to come out there every day and make sure that they don't violate the air rules, keep the dust down, keep the noise down, don't start their trucks before 7 a.m. Who does that? I doubt if anybody from the city does that, including the planning people. Who? Are we going to have to do it? We're going to have to monitor them? So obviously, I think this is, we're opposed obviously to the project, and I think if you would put yourself for a moment in our position and realize that this is not just where you wiggle your nose and that beautiful picture shows up and all these homes are out there. It's not like that, and it won't be like that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions to the speaker? Thank you. And at this time, we'll go back to staff. I did want to state that I do have, now there's 3 cards, statement cards. There are 2 in support and 1 opposed. Ms. Leopold?
Thank you, Chair Reynolds. Just for clarification, the Conejo Recreation and Park District does service this particular property. It may have been stated somewhere that the Ventura Resource Service Area number 33 serviced it, but that's incorrect. With regard to Lot 15, this is called out as an open space lot. There is a Costco trail requested for this area, and Edison does have an exclusive easement over a portion of this area. With regard to traffic concerns and the possible U-turn at Upper Ranch Road intersection, Larry Tay is available from Public Works to provide any perspective on that concern. And that concludes staff's comments.
Thank you. Mr. Tay, did you want to make a statement on that?
Yes, please. Chair Reynolds, members of the Commission, Larry Tay, Public Works Traffic Division. Just want to make a couple comments regarding the traffic generation and the access that was discussed tonight. In terms of looking at traffic generation rates for single-family dwellings, the industry standard is to assume that each single-family dwelling results or produces 10 trips per day. Applying that rate to the number of units that are being proposed, that's going to result in a total traffic generation of 140 vehicles. Now, these 140 vehicles are going to have different origins and destinations, and they're going to be spread out during the course of the day. So the impacts to any one location at any given time are relatively negligible. Secondly, when looking at the performance of our roadway facilities on both Westlake Boulevard and Canaan Road, all of the signalized intersections from Arbolez all the way to Teal Boulevard, and all the signalized intersections on Canaan Road between Westlake Boulevard and the city limits are currently performing at or better than the city's level of service requirement. And we don't expect that the additional 140 trips generated by this project would adversely impact any of those intersections. And in terms of access, one of the things that staff did was to conduct an analysis of the availability of gaps on Canaan Road to determine how much difficulty or how much ease vehicles would have as they're attempting to turn into and out of the project site. What I determined was that during the peak periods, both the morning and the afternoon, on a typical weekday, one would expect approximately 150 gaps in the traffic stream that are of 6 seconds duration or greater. And generally, there's different gap acceptance rates for people making turns across traffic, but 6 seconds is generally the magic number at which most drivers feel relatively confident. And I'm saying that there's going to be 150 in each of the peak periods. And that, to me, represents adequate opportunities for ingress and egress. Now, the 140 trips that are generated daily, 14 are expected in each of the morning and afternoon peak periods. Some are going to be coming into the site, some are going to be leaving. So when we're just talking 14 trips in each of the peak periods, distributed amongst 2 driveways. You've got Upper Ranch Road and the proposed access intersection at the eastern project limits. And so 150 gaps should be adequate to service the project traffic. And in terms of the potential for U-turns for westbound traffic at the intersection of Upper Ranch Road, in order to successfully negotiate a U-turn, you need several things. Adequate gaps in the traffic stream, you need available visibility, you need a refuge to start your turn from, and you need sufficient roadway width. It is based on observation of the site, all of these things are present, and therefore U-turns should not be a problem. They've been permitted for as long as Canaan Road has been fully developed, and there have been no reported accidents at that intersection over the last 5 years involving U-turns or any vehicles. Now, it's a situation staff can certainly monitor, and looking into the future, if U-turns become problematic, our Street Services Division can look into the possibility of installing some signs to prohibit that movement. But at the time, it's staff's recommendation to continue allowing that movement. And that's all I have, unless you've got further questions.
Are there any questions of the traffic engineer? Thank you. I'm just a little concerned with the fire engines, and if somebody was going up to make a U-turn, do they have somebody come out, or?
The fire engines making U-turns?
No, the fire engine coming out of the station, let's say on a call, and cars coming down.
Well, a vehicle that has begun their, has not yet begun their U-turn can remain stationary in the turn pocket and allow the emergency vehicle to proceed as necessary.
Okay, so the city didn't see any problems there or any conflicts?
No.
Okay, thank you. One of the Commissioner Ferris? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Tao?
All right, thanks. Actually, I was wondering if you could help me out on understanding what would be necessary if the current property owner decided they wanted to demolish the house that's currently on there and rebuild under the current rights that they have under the county. Who would they go to? What would have to happen? What would the process be?
It's my understanding that they would go to the county first and seek some guidance. They may be referred to the city just out of referral as far as conformance with possible city regulations, but essentially they would stay under the county unless there was a request to provide utility services, and then essentially I believe our code requires that they annex to the city.
Okay, and then it is true they have the right to have one unit on there because they can have one unit per 20 acres, and that's currently what's on there, and that's what it's zoned for. It says open space, but it does allow for one unit per 20 acres under this current county zoning, right?
That's correct, under the county zoning. Yes.
Okay. All right. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Mr. You want to make a statement?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to make a few comments in response. There's a lot of discussion of open space this evening. I want to make it very clear for everybody present that the land currently is designated in the county's zoning parlance as open space 20-acre minimum with a scenic resource protection overlay zone. Okay, that's the county zoning. That's also consistent with the Thousand Oaks area plan, which also designates the property for open space 20-acre minimum. Okay, but when we look at these properties for potential annexation, one thing that we always look at, and we talked about this in the staff report, is what is the city's general plan designation. So what is mentioned is county, but there's also city general plan and zoning as well. The city's general plan land use designation for this property is very low density, which is defined as 0 to 2 dwelling units per net acre. Okay, as you've heard, this project is proposing 0.56 dwelling units per net acre, so it fits within that range in the city's general plan land use designation. So that's a key comparison, is what is the proposed zoning vis-a-vis the city's general plan. there were a number of comments about this being open space in terms of it being developed, but I also want to mention that this is not city open space. City open space is much more restrictive, and in fact, in the county's open space 20-acre minimum, there are a variety of uses. If one looks at the Ventura County non-coastal zoning ordinance, you can see all the potential uses. But that then brings me to my second point, and that is that whenever there is a proposal like this for development, the county through, well, the LAFCO, I should say, encourages that applicants talk to the city and, in fact, propose annexation to the city. It's also consistent with the city's guidelines for orderly development, which it has signed off on in concert with other cities and the county itself. The idea is to try to focus development within cities rather than support sprawl outside cities. And that's one of the reasons why this, as we mentioned in the PowerPoint, at the end of this process, after the City Council action, in fact, this goes to LAFCO for the final determination on the annexation. So, again, it's open space, 20-acre minimum in the county's world. It's not city open space at this time. Annexation is certainly appropriate for this type of a project in terms of LAFCO's own policies, and we described those in the EIR as well as the guidelines for orderly development. Finally, just to make it very clear that the annexation itself is not before the Planning Commission tonight. And hopefully that was clear in the staff report. The issues that are before you is the pre-zoning, the tract map, the residential plan development permit, the Oak Tree permit, but not the annexation. That's wholly within the purview of the City Council. And remember, tonight is a recommendation to the City Council, then it goes to the Council for action, then it goes, this project will go to LAFCO for final determination on the annexation. I think that's about it.
Hasn't LAFCO already been made aware of annexation to it?
They're aware of it.
Some letters.
They're aware of it, and city staff met with them just to describe the project, which they encourage. All applicants and cities to do is to talk to them before it comes before them in a formal proposal.
So right now on the property, there aren't any city services, there aren't any sewers up there or anything. It must be on the septic system, the house. And
I'm going to defer that to Pam Leopold.
okay.
My understanding is that there are not city services. As I mentioned, though, CRPD does service this particular property.
Okay. Questions? Let's see, where are we? We were back, staff. Did you want to ask questions? I need to go back to the applicant for rebuttal, but go ahead. Why don't you ask?
Based on your last comment, Mr. Town, with what is before us this evening, does that include that if the commission did vote to move this on to the council, do we have the purview to adjust any of the conditions within this, or do we send the whole thing off on its own?
It is certainly within your purview if you'd like to modify a condition and recommend that condition be modified as it goes forward to the City Council.
Commissioner Ferris?
I just want to also get an understanding of the council had authorized concurrent processing for this. That's the reason why we have a recommendation for a zone change and tract map and the RPD and the permits. They're all at the same time, right? It's because they authorized that we look at all of it at the same time.
That is correct.
Okay, and it is. I mean, sometimes it's sometimes practice that they allow for that to be able to see all these things together. But sometimes there's a discretionary act, which is the zoning. We decide on its merits whether there should be a particular zoning for the property. Then we come back, and all of the other permits must be consistent with that. We're sort of, looking at them all the same, and we're saying they're consistent with the zoning, but only because we're about ready to recommend what the zoning is going to be. Is that a correct assessment of kind of how we're dealing with it?
That's correct. In this case, what you're looking at tonight is a pre-zoning, so it doesn't take effect unless the property is annexed. But it is appropriate for the commission to look at the legislative act, which is the pre-zoning, and the actual project together because it was authorized by the council, and it gives you the opportunity to really understand what the practical import of this proposed zoning is. The alternative method would be to deal with the pre-zoning and then the project, as you mentioned, afterwards. In this case, you're looking at all of them together.
Okay, anything else? Staff, did you have anything else that you wanted to add? Looks like the traffic engineer. Nader, Hayden?
Yes, good evening, Commissioner Chair Reynolds and members of the Planning Commission. Nader Haidari in the Public Works Department. I just wanted to touch on the question regarding dust control and erosion during the course of the construction, when, you know, whether there is a city involvement on that, and that the answer to that is certainly yes. Our public works inspectors, and if you talk to any developer in this city, will be on top of the guy from the minute the permit is issued until the end of the project. And you know, first item of discussion every single time is, you know, watering, making sure the dust control is kept down, and the work hours and all that's entailed in that. It's a very sensitive issue for every project, and particularly projects that we've been faced with recently, which are, you know, more infill, tighter lots, and the neighbors are even closer. But even on this project where there's more room, it's still a great concern because you're talking about a lot of earth moving. So it is something that's going to be monitored and looked after closely by the Public Works Department.
Mr. Haidari, isn't there also a meeting of the neighbors prior to grading?
There's a requirement.
Isn't that a requirement?
Yes, and that was implemented a few years ago because in many instances a project will obtain approval at this City Council and Planning Commission level, and then it will be some time before financing is put into place and permits are issued. So what we've implemented is prior to grading, you know, about a couple of weeks before the physical grading is occurring, there's a required meeting, and our department will allocate and indicate which neighbors are affected in the proximity of the haul route of the trucks and proximity of, you know, physical distance to the site. And there's a opportunity then for the adjacent homeowners to obtain contact information from the contractor, the developer, everybody's involved, obtain the schedule, and kind of be able to follow a little more closely what's happening there, as opposed to, you know, we walk away, there's an approval, and then a year later, all of a sudden, you know, construction starts. It doesn't, you know, we try to have a little more control and a little information dissemination, and that's been effective.
And are the neighbors also given a contact or so on, so that they're
Absolutely, and
immediately?
we require that in that meeting, it's not just the property owner and he just hands out some stuff. The grading contractor has to be there. All the, you know, contact information has to be furnished so that it's easy for the neighbors to actually communicate with people and don't have to make 15 phone calls trying to hunt down, you know, who they can express a concern to.
And the neighbors, in what radius or what area? Would all the people on Upper Ranch Road be part of that meeting?
Yes, certainly. And in some instances, it's more simple to identify really who's impacted. In others, it's a little bit more, you know, it takes some thought process. And in this case, we would, you know, expand the reach more than normal.
Would hope all those neighbors up at Upper Ranch. Okay, with that, we'll go back to rebuttal if there's nothing else. And there is a 5-minute, and I understand that Nancy Kirsten Schreiner is going to do the rebuttal. And good evening again. Would you please state your name and city residence?
Schreiner, unincorporated, Ventura County, Camarillo area. I haven't figured out an easier way to define that. First, I'm going to go through the speakers and generalize the comments. The first speaker made a comment, and several others, about 100 opposition letters. I think that's a gross exaggeration. You do have the supplemental packet that had a petition in it. However, we've gone through and actually plotted those addresses, 16 to 22, because there were some duplicates of properties and persons are within the North Ranch area. 35 are outside the area, and specifically in Lang Ranch. And I actually have aerials with dots on them to provide you that information that correspond to those, and I'll submit those. There was a comparison of the zone change of this property, the pre-zoning, to Thousand Oaks Boulevard. I mean, we're talking apples and oranges there. I don't think I need to say much further. As Mr. Town noted, and I actually concur with all of Mr. Town's comments, The annexation is a discretionary issue with LAFCO. It's not actually before this commission. And same with the council. Ultimately, the council will vote whether or not they want to seek the annexation. It's an open space lot under the county zoning. However, as Chair Reynolds is well aware of her years on the Planning Commission at the county OS zoning allows a lot of uses that are ministerial, don't require permits, that would be totally inconsistent for this neighborhood, such as greenhouses, grazing, cattle operations, agricultural operations, row crop farming, lighted driving ranges, etc. Those would be totally incompatible compared to what we're trying to propose. I think it's a misnomer when you say that it's only one house can be built. One house and a lot of accessory buildings that these neighbors would not want. They would much rather have this development that will increase their property values than what would happen under the county under permitted uses. A dwelling unit in the county is a ministerial permit. They don't get any comments on it. It's done at the staff level. So I think this project is certainly a lot better for them. With respect to the fact that we voluntarily did an EIR, as I noted earlier, there's no Class 1 significant environmental effects. This project didn't need an EIR. It didn't need an alternative analysis because there is no significant environmental effects to be mitigated. It could have been done as an MND. But because the neighbors, because the applicant was a good person and entity and wanted to go forward with this and give as much information to the general public, they did that at a significant cost. The biological studies have been updated. There have been no offers by any of the neighbors to purchase the property. They have met numerous times with the neighbors, contrary to some of the testimony. The fact that you may have vehicle traffic, as mentioned by your traffic engineers, the traffic analysis has been fine. The fire department, the police department have all looked at the site design and standards. All the streets and the private streets are designed to public standards. They've looked at all the emergency safety issues. I think the neighbors have said they went to the county and talked to the county about the zoning, but they failed to look at the most important document, the City of Thousand Oaks General Plan. This property has been designated, as Mr. Towns said, very low density development since 1970. 42 years this project has been slated to be annexed to the city and within the city's sphere of influence. LAFCO has approved repeatedly the city's sphere of influence and looked at this property to ultimately be brought into the city. It's only been because of a unique nature that it was owned by one individual all of these years. There was discussion about the Canaan Road access. All of that access was approved as with respect to Track 5707, which is actually already recorded. So there wouldn't be any liability, and I'm sure the city, and I know their traffic engineers, have looked at the standards and that it meets all safety standards. The opposition talks about grading and the fact that there's 6 months. The 6 months is for a mass grading operation so that all the paths, all the hills, slopes and streets are constructed at one particular time. There will be eventually individual construction of individual homes. One gentleman objected to the hours of operation of construction. Those are city standards, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., Monday through Saturday. This applicant has not asked for anything different that you wouldn't give to any other applicant or person building in this city. The air quality rules, I'd really like to address this. I recently was at actually a planning director hearing at the county having to do with Rasno Peak, and APCD was very clear. Rules 50, 51, and 55 apply across the county and deal with air particulates and dust. It is enforced by both APCD and, as the city noted, and I know your code enforcement staff and your planning staff and public works staff will go out there if they have any calls and complaints. APCD has a 24-hour hotline that's mandated by state law. Anyone can call if there's any violations of any particular laws. I think your staff has addressed the traffic issues, the traffic design. As I mentioned, fire and police have all supported this project. And I want to reiterate again, this project has not asked for any waivers or variances of city standards.
You've gone a minute over your time, so
Thank
would you please?
I appreciate that.
How about-
If there's any other questions, I'll respond to those.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Roundtree has a question.
Thank you.
Question for you. The folks who live on Upper Ranch who spoke tonight, they're not lawyers probably, maybe they are, but how could they all come to the conclusion that they did their homework or did the research to find out that there's open space that wasn't going to be built on, and they're in a situation that they're at now? So I'm not saying exactly, but help me here.
I can't say for sure. I can surmise two things happened. One, they didn't ask the right questions at the county. They asked, what's the zoning? County says open space. But they didn't ask the second question, which is the most important question. What can be done under the county ordinance in open space? And the myriad, as you see in that matrix that Mr. Town mentioned, of things that can go in next to their home that they would not want.
If I said this was maybe oversold by someone representing the property? I mean, I'm just...
That's always a
If you're going to
possibility.
spend a couple of $1 million on a home, you think you're doing your background work, and this is...
I can't say that. I don't know. I can tell you my mother was a real estate broker for 35 years, and I've heard repeatedly when I sat at these commission hearings, oh, my broker or my real estate agent told me that. I have a hard time believing that 90% of the real estate brokers and agents would really misrepresent something. They would say, go check at the county, and they would tell the person to go to the county and probably not make that representation to them.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Commissioner Turpel?
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
And I'm not a lawyer, but I heard one mention from, I believe the gentleman was an attorney. He talked about the modified site design that we're talking about that just doesn't make financial feasibility to go through on 7.5, page 87 of the EIR. But he also talked about that we couldn't make a decision on that unless we had the proper studies. Are you aware of anything like that?
Actually, those studies are not public record necessarily. They are confidential studies that are done by the applicant and provided to staff at times. The information we've provided is what we could provide publicly, that it is not economically feasible. As you're aware, and I'll just use some numbers that are out there in the public arena. If you look at the property values with respect to the homes on Upper Ranch or in that particular area, if you look at Trulia or Zillow, you're probably all familiar with that, they're basically open market built homes between 1.5 million and 2.5 million. If you take that estimated land value per acre, you're already giving up 2.5 acres for open space, and under the modified site design, you're eliminating another 7 acres. That's 9.5 acres. I think most of you can probably do the math of what that would cost. And you would not be able to do grading, especially try to do grading within 6 months so it doesn't impact the neighbors. Build architectural features of walls, entry features, landscaping, water features, extensive landscaping that's going to be in not just at the entry, but also buffer zones, and do that and still be able to even make a profit. Whether it's a profit whatsoever, you can't do that. Not to mention the land cost of actually purchasing the land and carrying costs through all the development, pre-development costs. It doesn't pencil out. It doesn't really have to, you don't have to have a full-blown study based on just that data and that analysis.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions before I close public hearing? Staff, Mr. Town? Ask staff then. Oh, the commission. Were you thinking of changing any conditions or the project? You asked Commissioner Turpel.
I did. I was looking, I heard from the opponents to the project. One of the concern was the noise and the dust and the time of working hours. Right. And he mentioned, if he has a birthday party for his daughter, he's going to be listening to all this noise and that type of thing. I was looking at it because it is a Monday through Saturday, typical what the city does, 7 to 7. And I'm wondering if we might set it up and just slop off that Saturday, if that would hurt construction of the project site, or if that's something that could be done and just make it Monday through Friday.
That was
a consideration.
Mr. Heher. He's going to quickly look at his municipal code. Is that it? You don't have it memorized? I bet Nancy is trying to, no, no. Yes, we will. Yeah, that's why I haven't closed the public hearing yet, so. After this discussion, we'll have the applicant come back up. Well, let's wait until Mr. Heher and see what the commissioners decide. Ms. Schreiner.
Good evening. Our code 811.01 does provide the general rules that it's 7 to 7 Monday through Saturday. So if you wanted to change that, it would be something that you would have to bring to the applicant and request that specifically that condition. But as far as the code is concerned, it is exactly as to code.
Okay, because I was just thinking, in order to mitigate it with some of the comments that we heard this evening, I would rather put that to the commission and see what you think before we hear from the applicant.
And okay, the discussion is, are you amenable to change the time that, is that only grading or is that any work on the project, even when they're building the houses?
That's open for discussion, I guess. I was just trying to mitigate some of the problems that were concerned, and if staff can address that, I do want to hear from the applicant, because I don't know how that would impede or affect the project as well. But
Mr. Town, did you want to make a statement about?
Just to respond that affects both grading and construction activity, and the condition that Vice Chair Turpel is referring to is condition number 46 on page 61 of your packet. So if the commission desires to consider modifying that topic, that restriction, that is the condition to review.
And it would be all grading and construction, or can that be separated out, or what? Mr. Town, I'm sorry.
Well, typically it is considered jointly, as the applicant is represented. They are proposing to grade and landscape the property, and then again, just so everybody's clear, the individual custom homes would be developed through what we call a precise plan of design process. And so each house will be custom designed, individually developed, and that'll have its own permit for the architectural style to ensure that that's consistent with North Ranch standards. So this condition would apply to both the initial grading and then the construction of each of those individual homes if this is approved.
okay, my feeling was primarily to the construction of the grading and the pads, because as those homes have to come back and get through, they could be built one at a time. They aren't necessarily going up all at the same time. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So I would be focusing just on the pads, the dust, that type of situation, in order to help the homeowners close by there. But it's a feeling of the commission, and then, of course, the applicant.
Commissioner Roundtree has his hand up. You want to add?
Just to kind of take what you're talking about here, when you're in the grading process, and I live right next to a project that had 21 homes built, so I can understand the stuff you might go through. You might just want to keep a Saturday to get through it as fast as possible, if in fact this project makes its way through the city. Saturdays, sure, we could certainly talk about that, but having gone through this 8 years ago, all I wanted it was to end.
Commissioner Ferris or Tapking? No comments regarding this?
I would share Commissioner Roundtree's feelings on this, I live in an area behind Amgen right now that we've dealt with this on a regular basis. So I don't care which way it goes, but when you're in the middle of it, all you wanted is done. But it never, it just goes. If it's going to happen, you got to deal with it. It's a pain when it's going on. There isn't any question about that.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, why don't we have Ms. Schreiner come back up and address this? You understand, just a minute, let me turn on the microphone and state your name and city residence again.
Nancy Schreiner, unincorporated Ventura County. I'm sure. In the area of Camarillo. I don't suggest that you modify the condition, and let me tell you why. especially on the grading activities. I think, as you note, several of you have noted, you want it done and over, and I think the applicant wants the grading activities done and over too, so that they can start planting the plants and getting everything so that it looks much better for the neighbors. If you eliminate Saturday, just in a 6-month time period, that's 24 Saturdays, so you've added 24 days potentially to the project. I would look at it in that perspective. I'm not sure it gets you a lot. In that I think it's better to just have the grading activities over, get the planning done, and have the project go forward.
So you would say no to the change in the condition?
We would prefer not to have it.
Okay, they would not accept
certainly
that
it's within
change,
the
is
discretion.
what they're saying. Okay? So with that, I'll close the public hearing, and now is the time for discussion, deliberation. Commissioner Roundtree.
My question is for our city folks, and it could be Mr. Town, could be someone else, Ms. Leopold, and it's got something specifically to do with the gates, the entry, the privateness of this community. Would you be the person? Okay. Can you share with all of us, what is the City of Thousand Oaks philosophy, if you will, of gated communities versus non-gated communities? I understand we have approximately 50 of these in town, and it seems to be somewhat arbitrary as to whether it's a gated community or not. I have friends that live in gated communities, large homes, or larger homes in non-gated communities. But from a staff level, what's the message that you're being given from City Council or your regulations in terms of what's required or what your preferences are?
Certainly, there are at least 50 or more gated communities. There are at least 5 gated communities in the North Ranch area. But essentially, there are standards for the gates, the design, the entry features of these communities. The concern, of course, is always from an emergency service perspective with fire and police access to these communities. You'll also find that when there are gated communities, there are further gates inside the gated communities, because not only do the gates not necessarily stop everyone that needs or that wants to obtain access to these communities, there are people that are able to access the gates in these communities, and furthermore, then the residents feel that having additional gates at their driveways is a secondary or a better precaution. As I mentioned, the concern is with fire and police emergency services to these areas. Anytime there's a gate, there's a delay. And when you have emergency personnel attempting to access these communities, it becomes an obstacle.
Let me ask my question a different way. Does the city encourage or discourage private gated communities?
I would say the city does not have a preference. Essentially, as I said, there are standards for the gates, for the type of access and the entry features. So essentially, it does show that it's more of a barrier to the community. But then again, if you have entry features that are rather aesthetic and pleasing in their appearance, it does beautify the area.
Are gated communities safer than non-gated communities?
That's probably something that the police would probably address, but essentially any community is subject to crime or vandalism or other types of problems with fire or any other type of police or emergency services needed. The difficulty here is that you've got an established North Ranch area with a lot of gated communities. They have private streets which are maintained by the Homeowners Association. We have not had any problems with the private streets being maintained by those entities, and so essentially it's not been a problem. That's my That's my final.
Thanks. My questions are kind of even more basic in nature, is that we seem to be approving and developing projects in Thousand Oaks that are all these little mini communities, as opposed to a community where people can actually walk from one neighbor to the next. I notice this project has no sidewalks, and they're asking for, a waiver of sidewalks. There's a lot of neighborhoods that don't have sidewalks, and there's a lot of neighborhoods that do. So it's more philosophical. Are we trying, like on the Thousand Oaks specific plan, encourage people to walk and to get to meet people in the community? Or are we creating more walls to saying, no, I don't want to talk to my neighbors?
Essentially, you're creating a community there, and that's why they have a homeowners association, to come together as a neighborhood. So you're creating mini neighborhoods in a sense. You're not just walling off this area. But the point is that, yes, they do not have sidewalks, and that's consistent with the North Ranch area. But you have a low-level density of homes, and you have private streets. So many times I've been through the North Ranch. There are people walking adjacent, or actually on the private streets. There's a 6-foot wide utility easement area adjacent to the private street. So typically there are people that, yes, use the private street as an access for pedestrians or for bicycles. But essentially you're creating mini neighborhoods. That's really what you're doing, these small communities.
So the fact there are no sidewalks and we're forcing our pedestrians to walk in the street is not a concern for safety?
Again, these are private streets. They're low-level traffic streets. Again, they're gated, so you have less traffic from the surrounding area accessing these streets. Larry Tay with Public Works might want to address this item also with regard to the private streets and gated communities.
Right, I guess with, as far as the traffic division is concerned, we just require that all the facilities be designed to public road standards, and any concerns that we would have related to the gated entry would be with respect to any potential queuing that would occur at the gates that might spill back onto the arterial street. That's why there's a minimum setback in terms of the distance, that the gate has to be a certain distance from, I guess, the center line of the main street, and there has to be, I guess, a call box that also has certain requirements in terms of specific locations to give visitors ample opportunities to make a phone call or to punch keys on an entry pad without interfering potentially with traffic on the main street. And just to echo what Pam said, there are no sidewalks in much of the North Ranch areas, and there are relatively low speeds, low volumes, and there aren't that many destinations where pedestrians would actually walk to and from, in terms of like a downtown specific plan area where you have mixed use, where you've got transit, where you've got other sorts of pedestrian activity generators. This is just a residential neighborhood, and like many others in the city, it just happens not to have sidewalks.
Last question, I promise, for you. Has to do with the gate, seeing how my back patio is directly adjacent to a gate. It has to do with the entry system. This one happens to be voice activated, and at the time the project was being approved, never thought of it. Well, what it says as someone enters the gate is access granted, and I have to listen to this robot sound. Is there something the city can do to work with the developer to get rid of that? Because the last thing all of you on Upper Ranch want to hear is a robot granting access to the community.
That might be a question better suited for Pam Leopold, the planner.
Is that an issue that has to do with this project? Is that part of the gate system in this project?
Absolutely.
It says that it's an audio?
It's as generic as it can be, similar to another project that I'm very familiar with that didn't go into its detail. And so when the project that I'm referring to next to my home was put in, suddenly we have a voice-activated or voice recognition system. So I'm asking the question now only because I probably should have asked it 8 years ago, so I'm going to ask it now. What kind of entry system will the people going into this community have to go through in terms of the sounds? Because that's what these neighbors are going to hear. I hear it every day.
Unless there's a 24-hour guard at the entrance or something.
Certainly, there's different types of entry gate systems. Condition 188 addresses gate design. This is on page 91 of your packet. And it does state that 188C, residents shall be provided with both an in-house device and a remote device to operate the proposed gates. They also talk about a manual override system shall be installed for emergency access in the last portion. We can also add to that condition and specify that no audio system shall be used with the gate operation.
Well, excuse me, Madam Chair, if you're going to be changing the condition, you would have to reopen the public meeting again.
These questions should have been asked even before we close the public hearing, too. It's best to ask all the questions, so. Okay. So you want that actually put in, so we'll ask the applicant, we'll reopen the public hearing.
Thank you.
Okay, and I'll ask Ms. Schreiner to come back up and state your name and city of residence.
Nancy Kirsten Schreiner, unincorporated Ventura County area of Camarillo. Actually, I don't think we have any objection to that condition. The only thing I would add to it would be, unless required by state or federal law, my only thoughts right now would be somebody that may be hearing impaired, there may be something in the ADA or something like that that may require some sort of voice activation. I don't know right now as I stand before you, so I would just put that caveat on there. But my applicants don't have any plans to put one in that's got an audible system to it unless it's required by law. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Okay, so let's see. We haven't done a motion. We're still into discussion. Any other commissioners have any discussion? Oh, I'm sorry, yes, I'll close the public hearing again. Any other discussion? Commissioner would like to make a motion? You're all just going to sit there. The chair really shouldn't make a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
Okay, I'll
Commissioner
motion.
Tappan.
I will move the staff.
Excuse
Sure.
me.
Just one more thing. Before you make the motion, for the EIR, there's two aspects of it. This is an informational document. So the first aspect is to actually certify or recommend certification of the EIR as legally adequate to the City Council. And then you can get into discussion as to the project itself and what you would recommend for the project or the alternative, as well as the various other permits. That's certainly fine.
We'll certify EIR.
All right, let's try the first part. I'll move that we certify the EIR, as presented.
And that's EIR 330, I believe. Yes. Any comments to the motion? Commissioner Ferris?
Yes. I will not be voting to recommend certification of the EIR. I am compelled by the testimony of the attorneys and others that don't believe that there has been enough information to evaluate a modified site design for this particular property that would be consistent with our general plan and potential zoning. And I think that, while I understand this has been evaluated with this particular project in mind, I do think that I think there needs to be a better analysis on that I would argue a more reduced alternative. I understand that they've reduced by 3 lots, and they've stated that it's economically infeasible for them to do that given the infrastructure, but the current rights of the property is allow them to have 1 unit. And anything above 1 unit from where they are now to what they have proposed are all potential reasonable conforming use and potential modified design elements. So for that reason, I will motion.
Okay. Any other comments? Commissioner Drapel?
Yes, my understanding that this is a pre-zoning. That's why I asked the question of the applicant, because I was a little compelled by that testimony as well as to what are these other studies that we're supposed to be able to, before we can make a move on any of this. I was also compelled to believe in the applicant when she stated that there's certain things that can be brought out onto the public, and when you just do the simple math, as far as what this zoning would be if they cut those lots, the project couldn't go on at all, because the zoning is through the county, not through the city. So staff, correct me if I'm wrong, what we're doing is saying the pre-zoning of this particular property that actually can't even take effect unless the city council agrees.
We're only right now talking about the EIR, not about the other things.
Madam
We're only
Chair.
talking about
Okay, I guess I'm getting confused then on what
Mr.
you were talking about.
Two things here, and I just want to make sure we're all clear, and these are good questions, and I appreciate them. The first issue is the EIR itself, certifying the EIR. We talked about the alternatives, the no project, the project with 11, and the project with 14. And you heard the testimony from the attorneys about those various alternatives. The first issue you have before is whether or not you believe that the EIR itself should be certified, a recommendation for certification by the council as an adequate environmental document. That's your first issue that you have, not the issue about which project to recommend to council through these additional permits, etc. So those are two parts. The first part is to certify the EIR as a whole. I will also state that we have reviewed this. We've reviewed it with the author, Mr. Burgess, of this EIR, and the City Attorney's Office finds that this EIR is legally adequate and can be defended in court.
Okay, my question when Commissioner Ferris brought it up, that he was compelled by some of the testimony that stated that we don't have enough information.
Sure.
Which is what I went back to, which goes into that.
And that goes to feasibility. And so when you look at feasibility, you look at various factors, and we can spend days through the EIR process, but some of the key aspects of when you look at feasibility, one of the elements of feasibility is economics. So that is, if you heard Ms. Schreiner, she was mentioning those economics, that it's not going to pan out. That's a factor that they're presenting to you to take in and to weigh it, as well as the attorney who's saying that there is not enough information for the alternatives. So the first issue we have is the certification as a whole. We have presented the EIR as a whole, not which project to pick, but just the EIR as a document itself. Am I making it clear?
It makes perfect sense to me. Are we on the same page then?
Yeah, and I know Mr. Ferris was discussing both aspects, I think, and I don't want to misspeak for him. I think he was saying first he's not going to support the EIR, and then he was also getting into the project itself.
Right. I mean, there are. I mean, we have an environmental document that analyzes a project on this given property. They are, hopelessly intertwined.
Understand.
The issue the reason why I will not support the motion is that I do not believe the environmental impact report is an adequate assessment of what SEQRA requires for this particular thing, mainly in the sense of the analysis of alternatives. That's
fine.
Okay, are we clear on the motion? And it was Commissioner Tapking. Any final words on it? Okay, please vote on the certification of the EIR 330.
Motion passed 4-1. Commissioner Ferris opposed.
Okay, now,
clarification, and that was a motion to recommend to the City Council that
right, these are only recommendations to the City Council. Right.
That is correct.
So the City Council has to still go through the same process. Commissioner Tapking, did you want to finish, or you want someone else to make the motion now?
I'll continue on.
Okay.
It's my night to make motions, I guess. I will move the recommendation again from the staff on the approval for the Upper Ranch Road project. I'm not going to read the numbers off. That's already been read into the record, including the modification of the audio system for the entry gate system.
188.
188. And
144.
And 144. That's correct. Okay.
Okay. Everyone understand the motion? Okay. Comments to the motion. Commissioner Ferris.
Thanks. I too will oppose this motion. I can now start to talk a little bit about the specifics of the project that we have in front of us. what is brought in front of us, we have, in this particular motion, there's actually one recommendation for a discretionary action, and then there are other rights that are granted because they're going to be consistent with what we decide about the discretionary action. We have the ability to decide using what we'd like to see, given the evidence and what's consistent, about what we think would be best for this property if it were in fact to be annexed and zoned. The recommendation is to be at 0.4 or 0.56 units per net acre, primarily because the project that we're asking to also be consistent with that is at 0.56. But there really are no rights that the property owner has at this point in time until the things that we are granting them get approved. Once they get approved and the zoning would be at 0.56, he would then have rights to be able to build at that zoning. That's what we have, is these legislative discretionary actions, evaluate what's best for the community. Is this the right way to be able to zone this in this particular area? And then we evaluate projects for which they have rights to build at. We're kind of putting them both at the same time. It's convenient. It's convenient for the city. It's convenient for the applicant. But we are, in fact, mixing them up just a little bit. Again, the property owner, they took a risk. They look at an investment. They said there's an opportunity here to be able to, under city zoning or city general plan and the neighboring developments that are in the city, that it could be consistent with the neighboring elements at roughly, a little bit higher than, half an acre or half of a unit per net acre. But there's certainly no right that they have at this point in time. And the property owners know that what the current zoning is. And as Ms. Schreiner points out, there are a number of uses there that if you were to see them, you'd probably be upset about them, but they might tell you they've got the rights to do that. They certainly don't have any current rights to build 14 homes. And, the general plan consistency of 0 to 2 units per net acre, that is the general plan, but the current use of the property would also be consistent with that at a very low level. The sphere of influence being consistent, all those justify the city's decision to do that. You wouldn't be able to make it city open space because that's extremely restrictive and it's not consistent with the city's general plan. So this is something that, regardless of what the city does decide to do, there may very well be there may be some very limited development, but it's all a matter of what the decisions and choices are of the city government to do that. And so there's some discretion to be held in there. Given the evidence that I've seen and what I believe could work better for the community and getting much more community support for something like this, I would prefer it to be lower. And for that reason, I would not be in favor of the motion.
Any other comments in the motion? I'm going to support the motion. I will state that I was friendly with Pat Miller. Once the Canal Valley Historical Society designated her Doña Triunfal, one year I started driving her, Pat and her husband, I called him Dick, around and also up to things at the Ventura County Museum. And so I was up at her house quite a bit, and there were some beautiful Indian things, and because of them riding the horses. But I remember her saying, and I said this to staff the other day, and I think they were taken back. I remember one time in the car, Pat said to me, she says, "Darrell, I live in the slums of North Ranch." And that's what she called the property. And it made me feel bad at that time that she would think of it as that way. But she always would say that it was going to be developed and it will be beautiful after I die. That it was always her plan to have it developed. And I feel that this is a very good plan that's been brought forth with 14 homes. And I think Lot 13 is probably that's where the house is. And I think everyone hates to see anything built in their backyard. I had a vacant lot behind me when I built my house, and then eventually someone came in and built, and I remember our property owner saying, "Oh, gee, you just don't want anything built there," and we said no, we just wanted it a one-story instead of a two-story or something. And I live in an area that does not have street lights or sidewalks. It's a custom home, Caneo Oaks, And Canal Oaks is that way. It doesn't have as many huge homes as North Ranch does, but it's an area, and people walk all the time, all hours of the night. I'm always surprised to see people walking without any street lights, you know, at 10, 11 o'clock at night. They're walking the neighborhood. And I think people feel safe in our city, or in some areas of the city. But I'm very supportive of this plan, only because I think that it's well thought out. I like the 20-foot buffer. I think that was a great idea to do that, so there's privacy of the neighbor. The only bad thing will be the grading and the building. And being this type of area, or development, it's not going to be built all at once. So, and with the economy, you have no idea. There could be vacant lots for many, many years on this, depending on, you know, hopefully our economy changes. But I'm very satisfied with the plan, and with that, I'm going to support the motion made by Commissioner Tapkin. So any other? Commissioner Chappelle?
I hit the wrong button. I'm going to support the motion as well. I just think that the area is extremely suitable for this type of development right there next to North Ranch. I think it would be an added addition. As far, I'm sensitive to what Commissioner Ferris brought up, but Mr. Heher stated that staff has gone through the EIR, feels that it can be defended in court. And so I felt satisfied with that vote, so I'm going to support the motion as well.
Any other comment? Final comments to your motion, Commissioner Tapkin?
Okay, closing comments. Thanks for the points you made on this. I think that's really important. The biggest issue I see with this, again, is that this is the last piece in the area. However, in speaking to support this, it's consistent with the area. I'm looking forward to seeing this completed and seeing the area completed as it is. Having lived in this community probably longer than anybody in the room anymore, I remember Lang Ranch when it was in fact Lang Ranch. I remember going through this area all the way along. This is consistent with the general plan. It was always expected from our perspectives to see this developed. I do not like the alternatives of something that Nancy, frankly, I had not thought a great deal about. The prospect of row crops or cattle back in this area are not appealing, and having seen that happen in a couple of areas recently, that's a pretty frightening area. Having larger lots, you can argue that either way. However, with the lots that are consistent with the surrounding homes, that provides some comfort. The part that I would find, unfortunately, I'm not a huge fan of, and those are the gated communities. I think that we tend to disrupt our community by continuing to bring little groups together into little organizations. And that's a very personal opinion. I happen to live in a gated community. It was the largest distractor to purchasing our home, quite frankly. But that's kind of the way it is. So again, I will support the motion, even though I think there are considerations that you could have less density. Financial issues are huge at this point.
Was that the final comment then? With that, I'll ask you to vote.
Motion passed 4-1. Commissioner Ferris opposed.
And this was a recommendation, so there's no appeal. It's going to the City Council. So, and thank you to staff and all of you for your presentation and your work on this project. And we'll continue on. We have a couple of things. Let's see. Mr. Town, Community Development Department reports and referrals.
Just to quickly mention that we will have a meeting, as you well know, in 2 weeks. Currently, we have several cases on the agenda that evening. In fact, we're up to 4 cases, as well as another minor action item for the Commission to consider, so it'll be a full evening as well in 2 weeks.
Okay. Thank you. And minutes of and resolutions of the Planning Commission meeting of July 23rd, 2012. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Ferris? Thank you. Please vote.
Motion passed 5-0.
Okay, and Commission AB 1234 reports. Commissioner Roundtree? Yes, you just came back. Just give it oral. Say where you were. You don't need to tell us what you did. We know what you did, so we've been there.
Yes, the League of Cities Convention in San Diego was put on this year. I attended, learned a lot about a lot of areas. That is my one report.
That's fine, that's fine. I used to think you had to write it when I first came on, so. Okay, thank you. I think that's the only report, and next time, the housing conference is I'm going to go to it, so if you are attending the housing conference, you'll be given an AB 1234 report with that. And with that, commission comments, I'm going to start with, don't forget about tomorrow. It's a day that we should never forget. The 9/11 was my 30th wedding anniversary, so tomorrow will be my 41st. And it's always kind of a downer because it's something that we always think of 9/11. And of course, then our son at that time was a Marine at the time, so we know that he was probably going to be going to war. So anyway, I hope everybody takes a moment. And also, City Council is going to be making a presentation tomorrow night. I know to the Rotary Clubs, but also I think that there's a program for the 9/11. So, Commissioner Ferris.
Yeah, along those lines. 11 years ago, I happened to have been on the East Coast visiting one of my dear friends who was on the second plane who hit the World Trade Center. And I wear this pin. In remembrance of him, Carl Max Hammond Jr. He's a dear friend. He was a dear friend of mine. We went to graduate school at UCLA, and the anniversary is a tough one because of that all the time. But I do remember him.
You always wear that. I don't think I've ever seen you at a meeting without that.
And that's the reason why.
Oh, okay. I'm glad to know that. Other commissioners, anything else? Okay, then we will adjourn to 6:30 on September 24th, 2012, and have a good 2 weeks. Good night.